It all began on an ordinary day when the world changed forever. Pressed face down against the cold floor beneath a boot, Takashi found himself treated like dirt by higher-ranked adventurers, mocked relentlessly for stumbling once again. Glaring back up at his tormentors, he remembered when he had been nothing more than an ordinary college student, before being trapped as an F-rank porter forced to gather magic stones or die. Everything had shifted dramatically back in November 2024, when sudden atmospheric anomalies shook the entire planet. Riding his scooter through the neighborhood, the young man had stopped in awe upon witnessing a blinding beam of light shooting into the sky, wondering if it was the mysterious phenomenon known as Danzian. Turning home, he eagerly turned on the television to follow the breaking news surrounding the incident. Broadcasts revealed that a meteorite strike had unleashed dungeons across various regions, spawning unnatural monsters that firearms could not harm and prompting government officials to address the crisis. Reports confirmed that physical and magical attacks were effective against these creatures, while some humans had begun awakening magical abilities of their own. Despite the world plunging into chaos, a thrill had stirred within him at the realization that reality was transforming beyond his mundane existence. Because defense forces and police were overwhelmed, the government soon faced a situation where standard military action was simply not enough. In response, national mobilization laws were enacted, compelling citizens aged 18 to 65 to defeat 7 monsters every week. Looking at his smartphone, he read the mandatory weekly quota required of everyone to avoid severe penalties. Upon checking his personal status interface, his heart sank to see abysmal stats that labeled him as the weakest in the world, unchangeable no matter how hard he trained. The system categorized citizens from S-class down to F-rank, firmly anchoring him at the very bottom of society. Stuck working as a porter for stronger former classmates who looked down on him, he was forced to rely on their leftovers just to survive. Suddenly, panic erupted in the dungeon as a terrifying B-rank monster unexpectedly appeared before them in an E-rank zone. He watched in horror as his party leader attempted to draw the monster's attention with magic, shouting for the rest of them to break through while the offensive spell shattered uselessly against the giant creature. Desperate to escape, the party leader stripped him of his pack and shoved him directly toward the monster, callously sacrificing their weakest member to buy themselves time to run. Terrifying multi-eyed behemoth loomed directly over him, casting a massive shadow as it raised its giant club to crush him into dust. As the lethal blow descended, a dark realization gripped his mind. If he survived, he would be doomed to decades of weakness and oppression under the thumb of others. Resigned to his fate, his eyes fluttered shut as he accepted the inevitable end, contemplating whether giving up was better than living in constant misery. Before the weapon could strike, a blinding bolt of divine energy erupted through the air, completely vaporizing the massive creature in a single instant. Gentle, ethereal voice echoed in his consciousness, offering him a second chance at life in exchange for an unstated price. As the dust settled and the monster was gone, a mysterious parchment floated down gently into his hands, leaving him stunned that he had somehow survived. Examining the mysterious item, he stared at the pitch-black paper inscribed with an intricate, glowing magic circle. Rejoining his party near the entrance, he quietly retrieved a magic stone from his bag and presented it to the men who had abandoned him. Party members turned in shock, whispering among themselves in utter disbelief that the weak porter had walked away from the encounter alive. Aggressively grabbing him by the collar, the leader sneered and threatened him, warning him to keep quiet about being used as bait. Knowing full well that authority figures in this world would simply cover up the party's crimes, he endured the intimidation without fighting back. Receiving a paltry reward for the expedition, he accepted the modest pay without protest, keeping his true thoughts hidden. Outside, the city operated under the authority of the Balance Adjustment Bureau, a government agency established to oversee dungeons and enforce monster-slaying quotas. He submitted his weekly quota at the counter, where the clerk routinely verified his F-rank magic stone and issued the standard completion certificate. Back in his room, he pondered holding onto the valuable emergency magic stone, realizing it could serve as a vital financial safety net when quotas became strict. Lying back on his bed, his gaze fell upon the strange card-like object, entirely baffled by its existence. He inspected the glowing crest inscribed on the card, bewildered that a monster could drop something other than a magic stone. Suddenly, floating system messages manifested, asking if he wished to acquire a skill named Otherworld Transfer. Initial terror made him hesitate, fearing a weakling like him would perish instantly. But the system warned that declining meant forfeiting a unique skill. Memories of his near-fatal betrayal rushed back, reminding him of the divine voice that had granted him a second chance at life. Determined not to remain helpless and repeat his past mistakes, resolve filled his eyes. Accepting the prompt granted him language conversion alongside transfer, unlocking a full status menu displaying his novice attributes. Activating the transfer swept him away to the world of Isidiffuhi. Relieved to confirm he could freely commute back to Earth. Without warning, a terrifying slimy beast ambushed him, pinning him to the ground and leaving him feeling completely powerless. A flash of steel, an agile warrior leapt through the air and sliced clean through the creature. The monster dissolved into nothingness as the swordswoman landed gracefully beside him. Gazed on the dirt, he looked up to see a young woman checking on his well-being. Expressing his gratitude, he stood before Arya, who brushed off the thanks only to point out his bizarre attire of track pants over a school uniform. She introduced herself warmly as Arya the Adventurer, offering a gentle smile to put him at ease. Unable to reveal the truth about transferring from Earth, he stammered out a cover story about having a hazy memory and hailing from a distant region, which left her softly sympathizing with his apparent amnesia. As they made their way toward the nearby town, he tried to explain his background as a student, though she wondered aloud if his strange clothes meant he was a noble. Watching her walk ahead, he couldn't help but marvel at how effortlessly she had dispatched a monster in a single strike earlier. For long, the grand vista of the bustling city of Rummel unfolded before them, its grand architectural stone arches and towering structures reaching high into the sky. Stepping onto the busy streets, he marveled at the diverse crowd of beastmen, birdmen, and fantastical creatures moving through the market, feeling as if he had been transported directly into the world of a game. Inside a lively establishment, she explained the inner workings of adventurer levels, noting that she was level 10, while proper adventurers usually reach level 30, advising him to check his own status screen, which only he could see. Mentally invoking his interface, he quietly assessed his options and pondered how his unique insight skill would aid him in combat. The guild counter, she turned in her recent hunt report, exchanging magic stones with a rugged beastman, receptionist named Lavant, to claim her hard-earned reward of 5,000 gold coins. Comparing the modest experience yield of level 1 slimes against higher-value prey, like level 5 jumping bunnies, he realized he still needed another 1,000 experience points to reach his next level. Eager to begin his training, he turned to her and asked if she would accompany him to hunt a simple slime, and she reassured him that with proper gear, he could easily handle one. She cheerfully agreed to team up with him, but then inquired if he had any currency on hand to buy basic gear. He produced a radiant, high-tier magic stone from his pocket to sell. The Beastman Guild official stared in absolute disbelief, suspecting the rare item belonged to a level 60 monster. Though suspicious of how a newcomer could possess such a priceless treasure, the receptionist acknowledged his unusual circumstances and proceeded to officially register him as an adventurer. The heavy thud, the guild master handed over an astronomical fortune of 500,000 gold coins in exchange for the single magic stone. Both he and his companion gasped in complete shock at the staggering pile of wealth sitting on the counter. Fully decked out in brand new high-grade leather armor and a polished steel short sword, he stood proudly alongside his companion, fully prepared to embark on his very first slime hunt. He stood out in the open grasslands alongside his companion, looking out across the terrain where their hunting expedition was about to begin. Arya quickly spotted a creature pulsating in the grass and pointed it out. Lock focused on the target. He drew his sword and charged forward with a determined battle cry. With a single swift stroke, he sliced straight through the gelatinous monster, bringing a cheerful declaration of success from behind. Defeated slime dissolved into light, leaving behind a small F-rank magic stone as a notification confirmed a grant of 100 experience points. Driven by momentum, he relentlessly slashed through one slime after another, his blade flashing in continuous motion across the field. Catching his breath, he stood exhausted in the field with his sword lowered, feeling the physical toll of continuous combat. Having defeated 11 slimes in total, system alerts informed him that his experience threshold was reached. As notifications flashed announcing a level increase, Arya called out in concern when he suddenly froze. Overwhelmed with emotion, tears streamed down his face as he stared at his updated status menu. Reaching level 2 proved that his baseline stats, which he feared would remain static forever, had finally increased. Observing his emotional breakdown over a low-level victory, Arya couldn't help but chuckle in amusement, celebrating along with him as he raised his fist and staring in complete disbelief at the small creature's remains. The young adventurer questioned how a single defeat could possibly boost a person's standing, noting that standard creatures barely grant any experience at all. Her companion agreed with a relieved breath, acknowledging the difficulty of his initial trial. Piecing the facts together, she calculated that his rewards were being multiplied 100-fold, realizing that such an extraordinary advantage could only stem from a unique, unheard-of ability. He contemplated her words in silence, considering his origins from a world devoid of numeric levels or experience points, wondering if his very existence was an anomaly in this realm. Turning back toward her, he quietly asked if she would keep his unusual trait a secret, explaining that his hazy memories made him cautious of drawing unnecessary trouble. The gentle, knowing smile, she agreed to guard his secret, though her playful expression hinted that she might expect a small favor in return. Their moment of quiet was interrupted as a horned beast burst from the brush, prompting her to draw her weapon and call him over to face the approaching threat. The violent creature lunged forward through the air with ferocious speed, aiming directly at him. Bracing his feet, he raised his buckler and iron blade, just in time to absorb the heavy impact of the beast's charge. Gritting his teeth against the creature's immense force, he struggled to hold his ground while she called out encouraging advice from behind, pointing out that the wild beast was already wounded and vulnerable to a decisive strike. Refusing to remain a burden after receiving so much help, he steeled his resolve to prove his worth. The surge of determination, he drove his blade forward, firmly resolving that he would grow stronger and rise above his role as a mere luggage carrier. The blow proved fatal, yielding another massive surge of experience along with a valuable magic stone and rare monster meat. She praised his victory enthusiastically, amazed that they had obtained fresh provisions on their very first hunt. Continuing their efforts throughout the day, the pair systematically cleared the area, accumulating a substantial haul of magic stones and supplies. Reviewing his progress, he observed his level rise rapidly to 4, though he recognized that his physical skills and martial techniques still needed significant improvement to match his statutory growth. As they journeyed back along the dirt road, laden with their spoils, he asked whether skills could be acquired through simple practice, but she explained that innate abilities were far more complex, all while marveling at the unusual abundance of food drops they had secured. As he listened quietly, the young female adventurer looked up at him with flushed cheeks, timidly asking if he would continue to explore dungeons alongside her. Expressing her hope that he would soon far surpass her own level, she gleefully agreed to rely on his help for future quests, her face lighting up with genuine delight. Shortly after, the duo celebrated inside the bustling Adventurers Guild Tavern, clanking their mugs together over a grand feast prepared from the monster meat they had gathered. While Takashi savored the delicious meal, comparing it to fine poultry, an arrogant senior adventurer interrupted their conversation, leaning over their table to address Arya in a condescending manner. The unwanted visitor grabbed Arya by the wrist, attempting to drag her away to join another table despite her vocal objections. Arya forcefully demanded to be released, regretting ever considering his past advances, but the intruder lost his temper and barked at her to shut her mouth. Nearby, patrons watched the scene unfold, quietly noting that the brute was once again harassing newcomers who had just registered as adventurers. Boasting of his 4th level status as the strongest adventurer in town, the bully asserted his dominance, but Arya glared back at him with lethal intensity, firmly warning him to back off. Sensing her fierce resolve, the belligerent adventurer backed off with a dismissive laugh, mocking her sharp attitude before turning away to rejoin his companions. To defuse the lingering tension, the guild staff announced a round of free drinks for the patrons, easing the atmosphere inside the hall. The night drawing late, Arya guided Takashi out onto the quiet town streets, offering to show him to a comfortable inn where he could rest. They arrived at a grand establishment known as the Raging Giant's Inn, where a burly, genial innkeeper warmly greeted Arya upon her return. Arya introduced Takashi as her new adventuring partner to the giant innkeeper, Mateo, and inquired about renting a room for him for the upcoming month. During her long-term arrangement, Takashi suddenly remembered his university commitments back in his original world, cutting in to clarify that he only needed lodging for a single night. Assuring Arya that he appreciated her recommendation, he confirmed his decision to lodge at Mateo's establishment for the evening. He stood outside the guest room as Arya stressed the importance of sticking together for a while, insisting that securing this room for the night was their best course of action. Once inside, the host showed them the space, and Arya reassured him that he could ask her if he needed help with anything, to which he quietly replied that he would be fine. She suggested gathering downstairs for a meal after a brief rest, leaving him alone to sink onto the bed and realize that returning home might simply be a matter of wishing for it. A glowing prompt floated before his eyes, offering the choice to return to Earth, leading him to grab a pen and paper to write a quick message before deciding. On the desk, he left a handwritten note thanking Arya for everything and apologizing for his sudden departure, accompanied by a modest pouch of gold as a token of appreciation. Lying back down on the bed, the youth pondered whether the treasures and equipment he brought would cross over with him as he confirmed his selection to return. In an instant, he opened his eyes to the familiar sight of his modern apartment bed, the digital alarm clock confirming it was early morning back on Earth. His immense relief, the sword, armor, and magic stones retrieved from the fantasy realm were laying right beside him, successfully fulfilling his quota for the upcoming week. Wasting no time, he hopped onto his scooter and sped toward the local fiscal adjustment division to turn in his findings before attending his university lectures. At the reception desk, the attendant greeted him warmly as he presented his daily submission of magic stones. She logged his single F-rank stone into the system and commended his diligent work ethic, which he acknowledged with a humble smile. Later during his university lecture, he reflected on how seamless it was to travel between worlds, realizing his quota would be effortless to maintain, until an abrasive voice abruptly called out to him. An arrogant classmate named Yamada sneered down at him, casually ordering him to serve as a low-tier luggage carrier for their party at the dungeon later that afternoon. Keeping his composure, the young man quietly recalled the secret stash of 25 high-value magic stones currently sitting in his possession. Yamada slammed a hand down and berated him to carry their gear. He calmly declined the demand, stating he had an afternoon class to attend instead. He felt the aggressive tug on his collar as Yamada confronted him, demanding to know how an lowest-rank hunter could possibly meet his quota of magic stones alone without relying on the group. Takashi remained completely unfazed by the physical intimidation, merely noting the logic behind the confrontation. Aware of the suspicious glares from the rest of the party, Yamada realized that allowing Takashi to enter the dungeon alone would arouse immediate suspicion from authorities, forcing him to reconsider his approach. Recognizing that survival and compliance were the only viable paths in this unforgiving world, a quiet resolve settled over the room. Reluctantly accepting the arrangement, the group turned on their heels and began moving out toward the dungeon entrance. As they entered the labyrinth, the hierarchy within the team was clear. Yamada served as the D-level leader, accompanied by higher-rank combatants, while Takashi was relegated to carrying heavy baggage at the rear as the lowest-ranked bait. Deep inside the cavernous tunnels, a massive, huge ant emerged, prompting Takashi to recall the classification of monsters spanning from S-class down to E-class. With coordinated strikes, the vanguard crushed the monstrous insect, leaving its shattered exoskeleton upon the blood-stained earth. Collecting the low-grade magic stones left behind, Yamada barked insults at Takashi, warning him not to drop the valuable loot. After 3 grueling hours of hunting F-rank beasts, the group decided to wrap up their run, completely unaware of the threat lurking ahead. Suddenly, a colossal creature towered over them, casting a deadly shadow across the shocked expedition team. Panic erupted among the hunters as they recognized the formidable beast as a C-rank fire ant, a creature that had no business appearing in an E-rank dungeon. Mada desperately yelled for everyone to stay calm, warning that panicking would only play directly into the monster's hands. Yuki attempted to stem the assault with a defensive magic barrier, but the overwhelming power of the beast shattered her spell effortlessly. Fire Ant struck with violent precision, smashing through weapons and sending shockwaves rippling through the front lines. His defensive skill buckled under the monster's overwhelming force. Yamada abandoned all leadership duties and screamed for retreat. He stood frozen in sheer horror as the colossal ant beast towered over the slaughtered remains of the 8-member subjugation squad. Clamping a hand over his mouth to stifle his frantic breaths, his mind spiraled into panic, despairing that his life was about to end. Before he could even process the slaughter, the massive creature lurked forward, its sheer weight shattering the stone cavern walls around him as it closed in for the kill. Desperate eyes widening in a sudden flash of realization, a final, crazy ray of hope struck him, a lingering possibility that he might just be able to escape the impending doom. Just as the monster's jaws gaped open to devour him, a mysterious floating prompt materialized in midair, asking if he wished to travel to another world, prompting him to select yes in a bid for stumbling through the rift. Takashi collapsed backward onto the wooden floor of the room, breathing heavily as the disorientation swept over him. Looking out toward the familiar stone buildings, he realized with a gasp that his emergency spell had successfully transported him back to the town of Istifai. He stood near the doorway, contemplating the mechanics of his ability. He reasoned that concentrating on a visual location allowed him to travel, yet leaving his companion's gear behind in the other world presented a dire dilemma. Determined to rectify the situation, he stared intently at his device, focusing all his willpower on returning to the dungeon. Transition was instantaneous, but terror struck immediately as he reappeared directly in front of a giant fire ant, its mandibles snapping inches away. Panicking, he stumbled backward through the dimensional void once more, flailing in mid-air as the terrifying vision of the monster vanished. He slammed heavily back onto the apartment floor, gasping for air while struggling to steady his racing heart. Slumped helplessly on the floor, despair washed over him. He pondered whether he could simply wait for the creatures to disperse. Yet the grim reality remained that escaping the dungeon alone was nearly impossible. A harrowing flashback of a monstrous threat towered over his mind, causing him to cry out in lingering terror. Suddenly, Arya and Mateo materialized around him. Arya scolded him frantically for vanishing without warning, while Mateo noted how visibly shaken the young man was. Arya gently held him in a supportive embrace as Takashi babbled incoherently about the terrifying swarm of giant ants. Kneeling beside him on the floor, she softly asked if he had settled down, to which he offered a quiet word of gratitude. He attempted to explain his panic, concealing the truth about world transportation while emphasizing his fear of failing to defeat the monsters. Teo offered a pragmatic response, acknowledging that while panicking before a level 30 fire ant was understandable for a beginner, overcome it required true resolve. Veteran adventurer explained that their thick exoskeletons resisted standard physical attacks, noting that wind attribute magic was the key to defeating them. His thoughts immediately turned to wind attribute magic, the key weakness he needed to exploit. As they approached Grandma Helen's magic shop, he inquired about how magic was used in this world. Arya explained that while anyone could learn if they bought and studied a grimoire, such books were notoriously expensive. Entering the shop, Arya greeted the shopkeeper warmly. Meanwhile, he stared at the shelves in awe, fascinated to realize that books of magic actually existed in reality. High above on a distant tower spire, a mysterious cloaked stranger stood watching them. Sensitive to the gaze, he glanced up toward the tower, though the figure vanished from sight before he could point it out, leaving Arya confused when Grandma Helen welcomed them. Arya cheerfully announced to the shopkeeper that they had come specifically to inspect the magic books. Shopkeeper offered them a pungent local delicacy, causing them both to recoil from the foul stench, though Arya quickly steered the conversation back to finding a grimoire for her companion. Shopkeeper detailed the fundamentals of spellcraft, explaining how the four basic elements, fire, water, wind, and earth, interacted alongside rarer elemental powers like light and darkness. Inspecting a grimoire of the wind element, he asked for the price. The shopkeeper offered a discounted rate of 800,000 gold, recognizing him as Arya's companion. After hearing about his situation, the shopkeeper regretfully pointed out that given his current low stats, mastering magic directly from a grimoire would be impossible. Suddenly, the mysterious cloaked woman from the tower stepped inside, announcing that she had overheard their entire conversation. He immediately recognized her as the figure who had been perched atop the spire earlier and demanded to know her identity. Ignoring his demand, the stranger held out an item, stating she would provide what he needed if his goal was to defeat the fire ants. He recognized the item as a single-use scroll imbued with powerful wind magic. Seeing potential trouble, the shopkeeper sternly ordered them to conduct their business elsewhere. Arya voiced her distrust, warning him that buying an expensive, single-use scroll from an unknown stranger seemed extremely suspicious. Stranger quickly clarified that she had no interest in his money. Instead, she demanded to see his status in exchange for the scroll. He stood startled as Arya interceded, arguing fiercely with the shopkeeper, Helen, that asking a complete stranger to reveal his status was entirely out of line. Before anyone could react, the hooded woman snapped her fingers, casting a spell that sent Arya collapsing straight into his arms. Commandingly, he questioned her motives while she calmly reassured him that Arya and the clerk would awaken harmlessly in 10 minutes, admitting her responsibility for the spell. Reaching out with a glowing palm, she insisted that she simply wanted to speak with him privately. Blinding light engulfed them, instantly teleporting both of them outside, near the forest outskirts. Standing amid the tranquil woodland, the mysterious woman prepared to make her real request away from prying eyes. Reaffirming her desire to inspect his status window, she acknowledged his hesitation regarding the insight skill and offered him a magic scroll in exchange for his cooperation. Realizing this scroll was his best opportunity to navigate his current plight, he acceded to her condition and summoned his status interface into view. Sharp eyes scanned his stats, pausing as she identified the precise, unique skill she had been searching for. He tried to ask what she had discovered. She abruptly dismissed his query and prepared to depart, leaving him mystified. A swirl of rushing air. The hooded woman vanished entirely, leaving him standing alone in the silent woods. Plunged into sudden panic, he realized the peril of his situation, stranded far from safety without proper weapons or gear to defend himself. Clenching the mysterious scroll in his hand, he recognized that relying on this gifted magic was his sole remaining option to survive. Tightly wrapped scroll held the crucial wind magic power he desperately needed. Firm resolve, he prepared to activate the magic scroll, determined to overcome the overwhelming odds ahead. He tumbled violently down the rocky incline, crying out in pain as hard earth and sharp stones battered his body before he crashed heavily onto the dirt. Groaning on the ground, he clutched his neck as the burning pain intensified, realizing that falling off the cliff had somehow triggered his mysterious transportation ability. Rising to his feet, he was immediately repulsed by a foul stench wafting through the air, noticing fallen figures in the distance before realizing huge fire ants were lurking nearby. Approaching cautiously, he stared in disbelief as a giant, terrifying ant monster feasted upon its prey right in front of him. Creature turned its cold, compound eyes directly onto him, its mandibles clicking viciously as it detected his presence. Unfazed, he held the magic scroll firm in his grip, taunting the giant insect to draw its full attention. Unrolling the scroll, a brilliant magic circle ignited around him, empowering him with wind magic as he resolved to stop running from his past weaknesses. As the monster charged with terrifying speed, he stood his ground, knowing he could not rely on escaping to another world and had to move forward right here. Extending his hands toward the looming beast, he unleashed a furious blast of pressurized wind magic straight into the creature's massive head. The overwhelming gust ripped the giant ant to shreds, shattering its chitinous body into countless fragments that rained down onto the barren terrain. Standing victorious amidst the debris, a barrage of system notifications flooded his view, announcing immense experience gains, a massive level increase, and a rare drop. Standing amidst the carnage of the dungeon, Takashi stared at floating status screens hovering in the dim air before him. Examining his updated status, he noted his rise to D class, holding a strange device while reading through his attributes and newly acquired cross-world transfer skill. Calling a similar encounter, he noticed a prompt asking if he wished to acquire a skill called tampering. Notification confirmed that this new power allowed him to alter his visible stats display without changing his true underlying values. Wondering if he could deceive others about his power, he promptly set his displayed status back down to F rank. His level had increased. He silently contemplated whether he could make it out of the dungeon safely. Surveying the fallen bodies around him, he recognized that Yamada's party had been completely wiped out, leaving him as the sole survivor. Considering his options, he realized the smartphone was left at an inn in Istify, and that he would need to contact the Equilibrium Division once outside. Beginning his trek toward the exit, he reminded himself of the mandatory requirement to report party casualties to the authorities. Merging into a dense forest section, he realized escaping would still be dangerous since he lacked any proper weaponry. Suddenly, a giant monstrous fire ant burst forth, prompting him to brace himself unarmed against the threat. Clasping his fists, he questioned internally whether he possessed enough strength to defeat the beast unarmed. Sheer determination, he engaged the creature in close combat, landing a powerful strike directly onto the monster. Standing victorious over the vanquished ant, a surge of triumph washed over him as he celebrated defeating it with his bare hands. Stepping out from the portal back into the modern city street, Takashi took a deep breath, relieved to have made it out of the dungeon alive. Riding his scooter through the quiet city streets late at night, he felt completely exhausted. Realizing the Equilibrium Adjustment Division was already closed for the day, he decided his only option was to head straight home and collapse into sleep. Slick sports car suddenly zoomed past him at high speed, startling him as it tore down the road. He watched it speed away, noting that the only thing lying ahead in that direction was the Kamegawa No. 2 dungeon. Reaching his apartment building, worries crossed his mind about what would happen once others realized Yamada and the rest were missing. Too exhausted to dwell on it, he resolved to deal with the consequences tomorrow and rushed inside to get to bed. Settling beneath his blankets, he quickly drifted into a deep sleep, planning to equip his gear the following day after passing through the forest. Early the next morning, loud knocking at his front door rudely interrupted his rest. Groaning under the covers at the ungodly hour, he wondered who could possibly be visiting so early. Upon opening the door, he was greeted by a stern man in a trench coat who introduced himself as Hideo Yamogi from the In-City Balance Adjustment Division, seeking to confirm his identity as Takashi Nakamura. Recognizing the official authority, Takashi asked if this visit was regarding the Kamegawa No. 2 dungeon, and Yamogi confirmed that it was. Yamogi requested that Takashi accompany him immediately to the city office building for formal questioning. Seated inside a quiet questioning room, Yamogi informed Takashi that his university had already been contacted before demanding a full account of yesterday's events inside the dungeon. Careful not to disclose his true powers, Takashi recounted a fabricated story. Yamada had invited him to carry equipment, but they lost their gear, and after the others were attacked by fire ants, he fled in panic. Yamogi summarized the testimony back to him, noting that losing their luggage and smartphones explained why the casualty report was so severely delayed. However, Yamogi pointed out a major flaw in the narrative, revealing that a witness saw Takashi returning from the dungeon late at night, around 11 o'clock. Yamogi pressed further, pointing out that the estimated time of death for the bodies found near the entrance was around 6 in the evening, asking why Takashi was running around inside for 5 full hours. Takashi nervously claimed he was lost and hiding in fear. Doubt deepened as Yomogi revealed that investigators found neither fire ants nor luggage in the dungeon, adding that C-rank fire ants rarely appear in E-rank dungeons, and noting he knew Yamada had been bullying Takashi. Yomogi openly questioned whether Takashi expected him to believe an F-rank adventurer could eliminate Yamada and his party, prompting an indignant response from Takashi, who demanded to know if the investigator was doubting his story. He remained seated under intense scrutiny as the investigator leaned in, explaining that while rare, individuals occasionally possess skills to conceal their status, prompting a request for a reevaluation. Bound to the high-tech testing chair with restraint straps, he realized he was under official suspicion for potentially using status-tampering abilities to commit crimes in the dungeon. Panic surged within him as he pondered the terrifying possibility of his hidden inner-world transfer skill being detected by their precision machinery. Weighed down by the pressure, he considered whether it would be wiser to confess everything before the device exposed his secret. Moments later, the examination concluded, and the investigator reviewed the freshly printed results with a serious look. It was immense relief. The examiner burst into laughter, declaring that there were no suspicious anomalies found in his stats, magic, or skills. The investigator sighed in relief, apologizing for the inconvenience, and explaining that protocol forced them to double-check given the situation before submitting their report. After thanking the investigator for his cooperation, he stepped outside and departed on a passing train, his official status screen confirming a completely baseline set of zeroed-out stats. Back in the safety of his apartment, he enjoyed instant noodles while reflecting on how his falsification skill had successfully bypassed detection, allowing him to gear up once again to head toward Istify. Upon reaching the rendezvous location, his former acquaintance Sato confronted him aggressively, demanding to know why he had ignored his calls after receiving a smart device. Sato criticized him for investing in full adventure gear just to enter the Sasayama 5th dungeon, questioning why he had even bothered to dress for the occasion. He protested that nobody had notified him about the phone. Sato mockingly shifted the blame back onto him for losing contact. Observing Sato's arrogant demeanor, he realized with quiet annoyance that in Sato's eyes, he possessed no basic human dignity. As they approached the entrance of the rank D Sasayama 5th dungeon, he lamented how his original plans for the day had been completely derailed. He was then introduced to Shirori Sakiya, a F-rank healer in the party, who offered a warm handshake despite his low rank, while Sato treated him merely as a luggage carrier. He quickly realized the humiliation intended for him as Sato openly mocked his presence in front of Shirori, forcing him to act as nothing more than an overburdened pack mule in front of the party. As they moved deeper into the cavern, a D-rank earth lizard suddenly ambushed the party, but Sato stepped forward and eliminated the creature with a single strike. While Sato collected the monster's core, the young warrior pondered his meager tally of 8 magic stones, quietly observing Sato's transparent attempts to impress Sakiya. Emboldened by his quick victory, Sato announced to the team that they still had plenty of time and demanded they press even further into the ruins. However, within the dark alcoves lining the perimeter, dozens of glowing eyes silently illuminated the pitch blackness. Lo, terrifying rumble echoed through the chamber, causing Sato and his companions to freeze as uncertainty took hold. From every shadow, snarls broke the silence as sharp-fanged reptilian heads began creeping out from the archways. Powerful reptilian limbs thundered onto the stone floor as an entire pack of earth lizards poured into the hall. Terror completely replaced Sato's bravado, and his face contorted in panic as he screamed at everyone to scatter. Panicked party attempted to flee, only to find the exit archway completely sealed off by looming monsters. Trapped in the rear of the collapsing formation, the young warrior and Shirori stood shoulder to shoulder as the beasts closed in for the subterranean arena swarmed with 10 deadly earth lizards. D-rank beasts, each capable of overpowering half a dozen adventurers. Even with a party boasting 3 C-class fighters, the odds were heavily stacked against the group as the horde pressed forward. Amidst the mounting chaos, Sato shielded the healer, shouting in desperation for the party leader to issue instructions as their formation threatened to collapse entirely. Before any tactical response could be organized, another monstrous lizard lunged, striking down right beside them with a shattering crash. Warning his companion to watch out, Takashi threw himself in harm's way to cushion the blow, prompting the healer to immediately rush forward to restore his health. Sakiya was astonished to find his health nearly intact, as a hit from such a monster should have brought an F-rank adventurer to the brink of death. Despite her frantic pleas for him to flee, he urged her not to worry about him. Relief was short-lived, however, as the vicious earth lizard swung back around, launching another fierce assault straight toward the vulnerable duo. Before the monster's claws could connect, the floor beneath them crumbled entirely, sending Takashi and Sakiya plummeting into a dark abyss down below. Dust settled over the jagged crater left behind in the chamber floor, leaving no trace of the fallen adventurers above. Down in the cavernous pit below, Sakiya picked herself up and anxiously checked on Takashi, who assured her that while sore, he had somehow avoided serious injury. Puzzled by his survival, she pondered how an F-rank adventurer could endure both a beast attack and a massive fall, questioning if his gear or an unrevealed defensive stat had protected him. She speculated aloud whether his surprisingly sturdy outfit had absorbed the damage, or if perhaps he possessed a concealment skill disguising his true capabilities. Sensing her growing suspicion, Takashi nervously tried to interject and steer the conversation away from his secrets. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Sakiya sincerely thanked him for putting his life on the line to shield her, dismissing her own theories while expressing deep appreciation for his courage. As the emotional tension subsided, Sakiya suddenly stumbled, overcome by a sudden wave of heat and dizziness emanating from the subterranean environment. Looking up at the sheer drop, Takashi realized that climbing back out was impossible, leaving them trapped in the sweltering heat while waiting for backup to arrive from above. He knelt beside his unconscious companion, realization washing over him as he checked her condition. The intense subterranean heat was rapidly wearing her down, causing her head to throb and her strength to fail. Spotting a dried patch of ground near an old stone well structure, he reasoned that water might be buried just beneath the surface. Driven by necessity, he activated his world traversal system, selecting the option to transfer across realms. Instantly, the oppressive, stifling cavern vanished, replaced by a lush, green forest where a refreshing, cool breeze brushed against his face. Knowing time was short, he focused his senses on locating fresh water that wouldn't be boiling or tainted. Faint rustling led his ears to the soothing audio of a running stream, and he immediately dashed toward the sound. Upon breaking through the treeline, he discovered a crystal-clear river flowing gently over rocky beds. Scooping the cool water into his hands, he drank deeply, relieved by its pure and invigorating taste. After thoroughly washing up and filling a small container with a life-saving fluid, he reactivated his dimensional skill to prepare for the return trip. Materializing back in the suffocating heat of the underground pit, he hurried straight to Sakiya, who remained slumped against the stone wall, feverish and breathless. Recalling basic medical first aid principles, he knew that treating severe heat stroke required rapidly lowering the patient's core body temperature. Murmuring a quick apology for breaching decorum during an emergency, he began unfastening her heavy outer garments to allow her skin to breathe. With her upper clothing open to alleviate the trapped heat, Sakiya lay panting softly as her body slowly responded to the relief. Disciplining himself to avert his eyes out of respect, he stood close by, keeping watch while preparing to cool her skin with the fresh water. Gently applied the cool water to her overheated skin, bringing immediate relief. Just as she began to stabilize, voices echoed down from the ceiling opening, signaling that rescue workers had finally located their position. Outside the dungeon complex, emergency vehicles and medical transports gathered around the illuminated tunnel exit to receive the survivors. Amid the recovery effort, Sato aggressively confronted Takashi, accusing him of triggering a trap and survival through cowardice. Takashi firmly denied setting off any mechanism, pointing out the absurdity of accusing him while Sakiya's safety had been put at risk. Sato continued his bluster, declaring that Takashi would have to serve as an unpaid porter to compensate for Teshigawara's demise, while Inspector Yamogi silently observed the heated dispute from a distance. Analyzing the scene with keen intuition, Inspector Yamogi reviewed the physical layout of the spacious hall, determining that Sato's claim about floor traps was completely fabricated and suspecting Sato had sacrificed Takashi to cover his own retreat. He leaned in close, his piercing eyes locked on Sato, as he pointed out that no traps existed in the central hall, demanding a re-examination of the facts. Continuing his stern interrogation, the investigator reminded him that utmost caution is required in an unexplored dungeon, stating that his careless leadership directly contributed to Teshigawara's death. With an unyielding gaze, he declared his deep interest in discovering what truly transpired. Sato could only break into a cold sweat, completely speechless under the immense pressure. Turning his attention away, the inspector asked Takashi to provide his version of the events as the group's porter. Takashi explained that after falling 10 meters down a vertical shaft, Sakia had used her healing magic on him, earnestly asserting that he was telling the truth. Consulting his notes, the inspector questioned how water could have been provided to treat heat stroke at the bottom of a bone-dry pit. And Takashi fumbled for an explanation. The inspector mused aloud about how strangely convenient circumstances seemed to unfold. Deciding not to push further for the moment, the officer concluded the interview and informed them he would follow up if necessary. After watching the official vehicles drive off into the distance, Takashi stood alone on the roadside. So concerned for Sakia's well-being, he resolved to return to the other world the following day to retrieve his belongings left at the inn. The next morning, outside his apartment complex, he activated his dimensional skill to cross over. Materialized in a lush wilderness, fully equipped in his adventurer armor beside a flowing stream. Calling the mysterious woman's advice that this area was near Lume, he decided his best course of action was to follow the river downstream. Before he could take a step, a vicious pack of wild dogs burst from the foliage, surrounding him with snarls and bared fangs. Found that time seemed to slow down around him, every lunging strike from the wild dogs appearing vividly clear to his heightened senses. Easily perceiving their trajectory, he smoothly prepared his counterattack. Swift and decisive slashes, he carved through the beast in an instant, leaving it sliced apart before coming to a graceful halt in the quiet forest glade. Glowing message notification confirmed his victory over the wild dog, awarding him 800 experience points and an F-rank magic stone drop. Reflecting on his progress, he realized he had finally grown strong enough to defeat F-rank monsters with effortless ease. Before he could celebrate his triumph, a massive, towering warrior loomed silently directly behind him, casting an ominous shadow over the unsuspecting young man. Deep within the rocky slopes, a fortified stone outpost stood guarded, serving as a secluded hideout tucked away from the main trails. Inside the outpost, a group of ruffians rifled through Takashi's gear, discovering a staggering 100,000 gold coins. They speculated whether he had come to rescue an elf girl or simply picked up a guild quest, considering if they might extract a heavy ransom for his return. Roughly dragged awake by his collar, Takashi was interrogated about his connection to the elf girl, though his bewildered response proved he had no idea what they were talking about. Disappointed by his apparent uselessness, the bandits debated whether it was better to simply eliminate him. Siding against immediate execution, the leader ordered him shoved into a dark cell alongside the elf. Shoved violently onto the stone floor, Takashi gasped as his eyes adjusted to the dim room. Strained by heavy iron chains inside the damp dungeon cell, sat a fragile young elf girl, staring back at him and peering through the heavy iron bars of the cell. Takashi stared in disbelief at the young elf sitting quietly before him. Suddenly, a violent cave-in shattered the silence as massive boulders crashed down all around them, forcing Takashi to dive forward to shield the captive girl. Trapped in the pitch-black darkness beneath the rubble, he checked on her before remembering the modern item he had brought along when he was transported to this world, a flashlight. His thoughts drifted back briefly to the residential building from his original world, where he had originally stashed the device. Reaching out in the dark, his fingers finally retrieved the sturdy flashlight. Flicking it on, a bright beam illuminated the cramped stone cavern, allowing Takashi to kneel before the startled elf girl and ask if she was injured. Noting the heavy iron collar around her neck, he wondered if the language barrier or the restraint prevented her from speaking. Drawing closer, Takashi gently asked if she wished to have the collar removed. Realizing his primary weapon was gone, Takashi paused to check his belongings before recalling another tool he possessed. The young elf reached out cautiously toward the unfamiliar beam of light resting on the stone ground. Her wide eyes watched intently as Takashi retrieved a heavy-duty bolt cutter. Apologizing for startling her in the dark, he positioned the strong metal blades carefully around her iron collar and applied steady pressure. The sharp metallic snap, the heavy restraint shattered and fell away, prompting a warm, relieved smile from the young elf as she spoke her gratitude. Takashi gasped in surprise, realizing the collar had been magic sealing, restricting both her speech and her latent powers. Placing a finger to her lips, the elf girl softly requested that he keep her abilities a secret as they prepared to escape the collapsed cavern together. With her magic finally unsealed, she began chanting a powerful ancient incantation. Glowing mystical symbols materialized in a radiant magic circle directly behind her, channeling raw arcane energy into her open hands. The immense force of her spell shattered the surrounding stone, sending heavy debris flying through the air as the trapped duo watched the wall crumble before them. Standing amidst the newly created breach, she extended a hand as a swirling blast of wind cleared away the lingering rubble and created a clear exit. Stunned by the display of power, the young man marveled at her ability. She simply placed a finger to her lips with a quiet smile, requesting that he keep her true strength a secret before they noticed heavy smoke billowing near the exit and agreed it was time to make their escape. They rushed toward the exit, observing that the fortress had been set ablaze. They formally introduced themselves to one another. He revealed his name as Takashi, while she introduced herself as Noemi. Nearby, unaware of the escape, a group of bandits lazily discussed their plans to report to the Adventurers Guild. Taking advantage of their distraction, Takashi quietly slipped behind them and snatched back his stolen backpack. Slinging his bag over his shoulder, he boldly announced his theft right in front of the stunned captors, who stared in shock at how he had managed to break free. Realizing the danger of letting their prisoners escape alive, the bandits drew their weapons and charged forward in unison. With lightning reflexes, he drew his sword and countered their aggressive onslaught in a single fluid motion. He wove seamlessly through the enemy ranks, parrying strikes and delivering decisive blows before the bandits could react. Blades clashed against theirs in a rapid exchange, neutralizing every threat with surgical precision. Executing a final swift combination, he drove the remaining attackers to the ground, ending the fight in seconds. Standing victorious amidst the fallen brigands, a strange sensation washed over him as a system notification confirmed he had officially acquired the swordsmanship skill. Noemi watched him with wide, impressed eyes, questioning if he was actually a famous high-rank adventurer given how easily he dispatched 4 men and how he had used a mysterious teleportation technique earlier. He nervously dismissed her praise, insisting he was merely a complete novice. Privately, he wondered if she had spotted his modern transfer abilities in the dark, but she casually reminded him that her keen elven vision saw through darkness easily. He listened intently as Noemi marveled at his extraordinary abilities, noting that while spatial magic was known to exist, storing living beings inside an isolated subspace was entirely unheard of. Recognizing the gravity of his secret, he requested that she keep his unique powers strictly between them, to which the elven girl readily agreed. As they stood before the ruined fortress enveloped in flames, he pondered whether the bandits had set the blaze to destroy evidence, prompting Noemi to reluctantly confess that the entire incident was a domestic dispute orchestrated by her older sister. Supposing that they set off for the town of Rummel, he urged her to cover up to avoid catching a chill, though his confident plan hit an immediate snag when he sheepishly admitted he had no idea which way to go. To resolve their predicament, Noemi summoned a glowing spirit amidst floating magical runes, leaving him watching in quiet wonder at the display. She gently requested that the tiny spirit guide them along the path toward the nearby town. The spirit leading the way, the duo began their journey through the dense woodland. A giant serpent lunged from the shadows to threaten them. He swiftly stepped in and warded off the beast. Following the wilderness trek, they finally reached the safety of the town's stone courtyard. Overcome with emotion upon seeing them return alive, Arya burst into tears and threw her arms around Noemi in a tight embrace. Wiping away her tears, Arya inquired about the young elven girl, who introduced herself warmly to her new companion. Noemi recounted how she had been held captive by bandits until he arrived to defeat them, leaving Arya astonished that a novice adventurer could overcome such a dangerous threat. Later at the inn, Mateo served a grand feast to celebrate his safe return, reassuring him that all of his belongings were resting securely in his room. Mateo laughingly revealed that Arya had been so sick with worry over the past 2 days that she kept repeating his name like an incantation, even using his funds to settle the lodging fees ahead of time. Relieved to hear that his room was fully paid for, he turned to Arya with heartfelt gratitude for keeping watch over everything in his absence. Watched as Noemi stepped out wearing a new outfit provided by Arya, who gushed with praise at how adorable the young elf looked. Settling down at the dining table with their companions, Noemi turned to him before their meal began, explaining that she had a personal request to ask of him. Looking at him with earnest eyes, she asked if he would accompany her to the distant kingdom of the elf world tree, taking him completely by surprise. Overhearing her request, the innkeeper interjected, pointing out that the realm lay vast distances away, a journey that would take a full month on foot or 10 arduous days, even by carriage. The innkeeper added that security at the borders had become exceedingly strict for elves, as news spread of a rogue elven assassin currently on the run after attempting to take the princess's life. Noticing Noemi lower her head and tremble at the word assassin, Takashi quietly wondered if she had already been aware of these dangerous developments. The innkeeper reflected on the cruel irony that a realm established to unite all elves throughout the world was now denying entry to its own kin. He went on to explain that the kingdom was also a grand destination for adventurers worldwide, home to the 10-level Divine Tree Dungeon, where meeting the goddess Ishtar at the summit reportedly grants any single wish. Describing the dungeon's peril, the veteran mentioned that monsters grew exponentially stronger on higher floors, noting that while he only managed to reach the 10th floor, elite parties had reportedly ventured as high as the 80th floor. Turning back to Takashi, Noemi pleaded for his guidance, revealing that her remaining family was trapped within the realm. Arya and the innkeeper watched in tense silence, waiting to see how Takashi would respond to her desperate plea. This solemn expression, Takashi looked Noemi in the eye and regretfully declined, stating that he could not travel to the elf sacred tree kingdom with. Standing at the threshold, Takashi regretfully announced that he could not accompany his companions to the elf divine tree kingdom. His allies instantly protested, urging him to come along, unable to comprehend why he was suddenly backing out. His heart heavy with conflict, Takashi silently wished he could travel alongside them, but heavy burdens weighed upon his mind. He recalled the strict mechanics of his situation. Time flowed equally between this realm and Earth, and the balance adjustment department maintained rigid quotas that had to be met. Failure to meet those strict quotas meant severe penalties would be imposed upon him, leaving no room for a month-long journey. As his companions continued to press him to reconsider and join Noemi, Takashi remained trapped in his inner turmoil over the administrative consequences. Bowing his head deep in apology, he firmly delivered his final refusal, explaining that it was simply impossible for him to make the trip. The group stared at him in stunned silence, saddened and bewildered by his sudden decision. Trying to shift momentum forward, Takashi suggested they visit the Adventurers Guild to hire a proper bodyguard for Noemi's journey home. Instead of seeking a mercenary, Noemi clasped her hands together with earnest eyes, pleading to be allowed to stay and work right there. When questioned about going home, she confessed that having lost everything to bandits, she lacked the money required to place a formal request at the guild. Hearing her plight, the cheerful crew member warmly welcomed her aboard, promising that she could work off her stay doing chores until she was satisfied. Overjoyed by the generous offer, Noemi beamed with a wide smile, promising to give her absolute best effort. While the others teased Takashi and Arya about their underlying motives for securing her stay, Noemi humbly accepted the kindness offered to her. Matters settled, Takashi excused himself and headed up the wooden staircase to the 2nd floor to check on his luggage. Upon stepping into the room, he froze as a familiar hooded woman sitting on the bed greeted him back home. She lunged forward without warning, pinning him before he could react. Arya called out from below, sensing something was wrong as he struggled against the sudden assault. Startled by her sudden aggression, He demanded to know her identity and what she was doing in his room. During the commotion, Arya rushed up the stairs to check on him, while he frantically tried to turn the door handle, only to find it firmly locked. Ignoring his panic, she pressed him about whether he had successfully defeated the fire ants. He reluctantly confirmed that he had, thanking her for the scroll she had provided earlier. He demanded to inspect his status window to check his level after the battle. Meanwhile, heavy knocking rattled the door from the outside as the innkeeper and others tried to enter, recognizing the intruder's voice. Determined to force his way inside, the burly innkeeper swung a heavy axe directly against the unyielding barrier. Outside the room, the innkeeper realized a powerful magical barrier was blocking the entrance, shouting that he would not tolerate such chaos in his establishment, while Arya voiced her concern. Before anyone could break through, a brilliant flash of magic enveloped the room, completely appending the space. Left standing outside the empty room, the innkeeper noted in dread that combining teleportation magic with a barrier was a technique exclusive to the demon clan, prompting Arya to hurry off to report it to the Adventurers Guild. High atop a barren, rocky peak surrounded by strange, silent figures, the two materialized far away from the inn. She calmly explained that she had relocated them to a quiet location where they could speak without being overheard. After she handed over his brought-along belongings, he relaxed slightly and snacked on food, asking if she was a transferer from another world or perhaps affiliated with the demons. She questioned his knowledge of the demon clan, stating that her teleportation spell and scroll were far from ordinary, and insisted once more on seeing his status. He agreed to show her if she explained her motives, privately wondering if she was just socially awkward. He summoned his status display into the air, revealing his level 41 stats, attributes, and unique world transfer ability for her to review. Upon examining his attributes, she bluntly declared that his current level was still far from enough, telling him that he needed to grow much stronger and leaving him utterly confused. She stood alongside Takashi before a massive archway overgrown with thick, writhing plant tentacles. Before them loomed a colossal, bulbous plant monster extending thick vines across the ruined courtyard. Without hesitation, she bluntly ordered him to defeat the creature, leaving Takashi incredulous at the thought of fighting such a monster. As a heavy vine lashed out at him, he shouted in alarm, realizing the immediate danger. The giant plant attacked relentlessly, slamming its heavy vines onto the stone floor and forcing Takashi to leap and dodge frantically. Barely escaping another crushing blow, Takashi rolled across the debris, realizing that this creature was far beyond his current level. Observing his struggle, she tossed a massive, decorated broadsword toward him, instructing him to use it instead. The heavy blade embedded itself into the ground at his feet. Grasping the hilt of the formidable weapon, Takashi braced himself, his expression turning resolute as he prepared to turn the tide. The new sword in hand, Takashi charged straight toward the mass of incoming tentacles. A single powerful arc, he sliced through the thick vines, triggering a massive magical explosion that obliterated the monster. As the giant walking vine collapsed in defeat, system notifications confirmed Takashi earned massive experience along with a C-rank magic stone and a sacred tree drop. She immediately inquired if his level had risen, but Takashi's status showed no level increase despite taking severe damage that left him at low health. Ignoring his shock, she urged him to find the next monster right away. She told him to drink the divine tree droplet to recover, and Takashi was stunned to see his health completely restored instantly as she instructed him to prepare for the next battle. Looking at his fragile state, Takashi asked if she happened to have any high defense armor that would allow him to fight without constant fear of death. In response, she reached up and slowly removed her hood and face mask, revealing her true appearance. Unveiling demonic horns and revealing her true identity as a demon, she offered to lend him her specialized armor, confirming Takashi's suspicion that she belonged to the demon clan. She nonchalantly mentioned that she had crafted the protective dark attire herself, offering to make more whenever needed. Thrilled by the exceptional defense of the robe and short sword, the young warrior marveled at her craftsmanship, confident he could now battle the giant plant monsters head-on. Testing the fit of the enchanted outfit, he found it surprisingly lightweight and flexible. He expressed his awe that such high-grade gear was handmade, reiterating his readiness to face the dungeon beasts. Side by side, they stood before a pair of giant, pulsating vine monsters, bracing themselves to charge straight into battle. Moving with astonishing speed and boosted power, he carved effortlessly through the thick tendrils and massive bodies of the plant behemoths, reducing them to pieces in a single swift onslaught. Breathing heavily after the swift victory, he paused as his companion noticed something unexpected and inquired whether his level had increased again. Curious, he summoned his status window to check his progression. Display confirmed he had reached level 43, yet his core base attributes remained absurdly low despite massive stat boosts from equipment. Unsatisfied with gaining only 2 levels, she insisted on pushing further to raise his level even higher, causing him to wave his hands in panic. Overwhelmed by her unrelenting pace, he bent over completely drained, pleading for a brief pause to rest since he was pushing past his physical limits. Looking down at him with an inscrutable glare, she contemplated the vast distances and dimensional boundaries connecting the dungeon to the forest near Rumor and his home apartment back on Earth. Finally allowed to return to his world, he collapsed face first onto his bed in sheer exhaustion, desiring nothing more than uninterrupted sleep. Recalled her earlier explanation of the armor's unique craft, woven from flexible arachne silk designed to compact down easily and blend discreetly into ordinary streetwear. She had handed him the compressed garment, demonstrating how it could shrink into a tiny, palm-sized crystal structure for effortless transport. As he lay fast asleep, his smartphone vibrated quietly on the mattress beside the crystal, illuminating with an incoming notification. Drowsily answering the call, he listened as the polite voice on the other end identified herself as Shirori Sakiya, the healer from the Tsushima dungeon, asking if he had a moment to talk. Kashi is surprised to run into Shirori Sakiya, who politely approaches him to ask if they could speak. Shirori asks for his contact details to meet up later, leaving Takashi internally debating how to handle the request since Yomogi had provided her with his information. Lightly making an excuse about his urgent quota at the balance adjustment division, Takashi excuses himself and brings the conversation to a quick close. Arriving at the counter, Takashi turns in his meager collection of 11 slime magic stones, earning a sympathetic reminder from the receptionist about his tight weekly requirements. Receptionist inquires about his schedule for the next day, checking if he has any plans to explore dungeon. She invites him to join a dungeon raid organized to clear an impending monster stampede, explaining that extra hands are needed to assist with gear logistics. She details how stampedes occur when dungeon populations overflow, prompting official hunts led by the Balance Adjustment Division. Incentivized by the promise of an exemption from his weekly quota, Takashi enthusiastically agrees to join the operation. Later, Takashi reviews the notice board detailing the upcoming E-rank dungeon raid at the Tsushima 13th Danji site, feeling a slight twinge of guilt for turning down Shirori earlier. Noticing the low expected attendance and meager rewards associated with hunting E-rank hellhounds and killer bats, he understands why few adventurers signed up. Quiet determination in his eyes, he prepares himself mentally for the task ahead. Fully equipped in his hooded disguise, Takashi enters the dungeon portal, checking his enhanced level 43 stats and specialized equipment before stepping inside. Faced with a massive hellbound monster upon entry, he steels his nerves, suppressing the urge to flee as he prepares to fight. Swiftly dispatching 3 hellhounds with ease, system notifications confirm his victories alongside the dropped magic stones. He continues his relentless assault, taking down a killer bat and absorbing substantial experience points as he dominates the dungeon encounter. Found the combat ridiculously easy, effortlessly wiping out massive swarms of dungeon beasts without taking a single scratch. Checking his status menu, he noticed his stats remained unchanged despite his total victory, calculating that reaching his next level would require an astronomical amount of experience points. Memories of bitter insults and past humiliations resurfaced, stoking his determination to grow stronger and protect those who depended on him. He realized that his progress was genuine, observing how effortlessly he could now overcome monsters that once posed a severe threat. Slapping his own cheeks to clear his head, he admonished himself to stop dwelling on the past and focus entirely on the path ahead. The cave sector cleared, he quietly made his way through the dimly lit stone corridors of the dungeon. Following morning at home, he accidentally burned his tongue on a hot drink while researching unexplored dungeon sites in the city. While enjoying a quiet breakfast, he reviewed details about a C-rank dungeon surprisingly located right beside a residential district. The official report indicated that while classified as a C-rank zone, the upcoming raid had drawn top-tier A-rank entrants alongside lower-ranking groups. Examining the high-profile participants listed on the screen, he contemplated the immense strength of veteran A-rank mages and the gap he still needed to bridge. Noticing familiar names among the large cohort of C-class trainees, he geared up and rode his motor scooter toward the site to ensure an early arrival. Upon arriving at the perimeter, local traffic coordinators guided his vehicle toward the designated visitor parking area. Staging ground outside the entrance bustled with excitement, filled with fully armored warriors and eager adventurers socializing before the raid. Seeking to fulfill his quota exemption, he negotiated with an established team and secured an assignment as their dedicated baggage handler. Just as the agreement was finalized, a cheerful voice called out his name, causing him to turn in pleasant surprise. Looked at her in surprise, noticing how remarkably different Sarashina appeared in her battle attire. She explained with a light smirk that, despite belonging to the Balance Adjustment Division and usually being exempt from quotas, she was actually a Class B attacker, though her role here was strictly support rather than direct combat. As she posed with pride, he couldn't help but wonder if she had put on the gear simply to show off, before they set off toward the dungeon, facing the impending stampede crisis. High above the rest sat an imposing figure, a high-ranking adventurer whose presence commanded silent authority over the gathering. Observing from a distance, Takashi noted the swift response of the higher-ranked combatants, recognizing the vast difference in their capabilities during an emergency near a residential zone. Silently resolved that if he continued to raise his own level, he might one day stand with such composed confidence. Meanwhile, the arrogant squad leader Soida took command of the party, barking orders to ensure all monster stones were turned over to him for distribution only after the raid concluded. Soida aggressively reminded the F-rank members that their sole job was to collect stones and report immediately if any monsters died, while Sakiya Shirori and Sato Hiroto observed the harsh reality of their low status. Kashi reluctantly agreed, accepting the harsh survival tactic required for weak F-rankers to avoid being eliminated. Sakiya approached Takashi, nervously asking if he had time to talk after the raid concluded, prompting Hiroto to dismissively urge her to ignore such lower-tier concerns. As the group stepped into the subterranean cavern, Soida called for the advance, just as a swarm of giant C-rank dark spiders blocked their path. The fierce strike of his sword, Soida unleashed a heavy blow against the giant beast, declaring his intent to finish off the C-rank monster swiftly. Vanguard engaged the massive spiders head-on, holding the front line as the lower-ranked members observed the intense skirmish from safety. Raising his hand to signal a stop, Soida warned the squad that a wide chamber lay just ahead, cautioning against reckless entry lest they be surrounded before a stampede occurred. Kashi analyzed the tactics quietly, comparing their systematic hallway luring strategy to his past experiences with Earth Lizards. Suddenly shifting tactics, the squad leaders ordered the 3 F-rank recruits to move to the front and act as bait to lure out the beasts. As the frontline magic users prepared their spells, a massive wave of monstrous spiders burst into the passage, swarming directly toward the exposed recruits. Surrounded on all sides by razor-sharp legs and venomous fangs, the recruits faced absolute chaos as the beasts closed in upon them. Crouched on the cold floor, forced to listen to the higher-ranked adventurers mock his group for their complete lack of combat contribution, the veterans dismissed the F-rank recruits as mere pack mules, openly plotting to hoard all the valuable monster stones for themselves. Outraged by his silence, Soida violently grabbed him and slammed him down, screaming at the young recruit for daring to ignore his demands. Shirori quickly stepped in to check if he was injured, voicing her frustration at how unfairly they were being treated, while Soida shouted for someone to illuminate the dark cavern ahead. As a faint glow lit the passage, the party halted in shock before a massive, crystalline monolith towering in the center of the hall, a structure that had never been present during prior expeditions. Without warning, a terrifying B-rank monster, a colossal undead centipede, slithered down from above the glowing pillar, fixing its deadly gaze upon the horrified adventurers. Before anyone could draw a weapon, The giant beast struck with blinding speed, impaling Soida directly through the chest with a sickening crunch. Seeing their leader struck down instantly, the C-rank vanguard collapsed into panic, screaming to fall back and contact the dungeon control division. Spitting blood, Soida desperately commanded his squad to hold their ground and fight back rather than deserting him. Amid the rising frenzy, Takashi instructed Sato and Shirori to retreat immediately and call for backup, while he remained behind in the rear to observe the battle. Surviving veterans rallied and unleashed a barrage of physical and magical attacks, desperately attempting to pierce the giant monster's dense carapace. The terrifying creature retaliated with a single powerful sweep of its heavy body, shattering their defense and hurling the frontline warriors across the chamber. Shirori gasped in horror as the beast loomed over Soida's broken body, preparing to crush what was left of him. With their leader completely neutralized, total chaos erupted as the remaining veterans abandoned the fight and fled for their lives. Ignoring the rampant danger and Sato's desperate pleas, Shirori knelt by Soida's side to cast her healing magic. Standing firm in the shadow of the monstrous undead centipede, Takashi watched her selfless effort, crystallizing in his mind the true strength he wished to achieve. He stood unflinching before the looming threat, his hand tightly gripping his jagged blade as he declared that he was not a coward who would turn and run when others were in peril. The monstrous centipede thrashed wildly, sending debris flying as Takashi scrambled back from its crushing strikes. Realizing the dire threat, Takashi quickly reached for his special healing potion, knowing it could fully restore his strength if consumed in time. Beast shrieked in pain as Takashi's counterattack landed, its dark aura crackling as the magic dealt devastating damage. A final burst of speed, Takashi pressed his advantage, driving his power straight into the creature while Shirori looked on in disbelief. The massive explosion of light and force, the gigantic centipede shattered apart, completely vanquished. As the smoke cleared, notifications flooded in, confirming the defeat of the undead centipede and granting an immense amount of experience points. Items dropped onto the stone floor alongside notifications announcing that Takashi's level and overall stats had dramatically increased. Taking a breath, Takashi verified that his true identity remained hidden from Sakiya, weighing whether he should slip away quietly before high-ranking authorities arrived. Approaching the unconscious Sakiya, he offered a healing medicine and instructed her to speak to no one about what had transpired here. Gently tended to her injuries, administering the medicine while maintaining his mysterious hero persona. Soft glow enveloped her body as the medicinal herbs rapidly healed her wounds. Gaspal slowly opened her eyes in astonishment, bewildered by the sudden recovery and the lingering presence of her savior. The final stern reminder to forget everything that happened, the mysterious masked fighter turned away, leaving her safe on the dungeon floor. Viewing his updated status window, Takashi saw that his level had jumped to 56, bringing his attributes up to the standard of a C-rank adventurer. Shortly after, investigators and rescue parties arrived at the scene, relieved to find the survivors unharmed while wondering where the undead monster had gone. Stood amidst the lingering confusion as the rescue team gathered the survivors. Questions swirled about the sudden disappearance of the monstrous threat, but Takashi quietly maintained his cover, confirming his safety while hiding the true extent of what had transpired. Reuniting with the others, Sato expressed relieved delight at Shiori's safety, marveling at Takashi's unbelievable stroke of good luck in surviving unscathed once again. Shiori offered her sincere gratitude for everyone's safety, though her gaze lingered quietly on Takashi, bound by their secret understanding. Guards at the exit directed the returning adventurers to present their belongings and turn over any magic stones recovered during the dungeon run. Passing through the inspection area, Takashi carefully navigated the checkpoint to avoid drawing suspicion to his hidden spoils. Briefly stepping away under the guise of using the restroom, Takashi executed a swift dimensional transfer back to Earth to store the massive centipede drop items before returning unnoticed. Rejoining the group as distribution began, he quietly breathed a sigh of relief, having safely stashed his valuable loot inside his hidden armor pockets. Outside the venue, Sakiya approached Takashi, offering him a portion of the magic stones as a token of appreciation. She insisted that he accept them alongside her own share, honoring her gratitude for his efforts during the battle. Later, News of the incident reached the Equilibrium Adjustment Division, where officials analyzed the mysterious destruction of the undead centipede. Inside the investigation office, Yomogi questioned Sakiya regarding the official report detailing the creature's sudden disappearance. He responded nervously, trying her best to keep Takashi's role hidden under intense scrutiny. She stammered through her explanation, attempting to account for Takashi's presence without revealing his overwhelming power. Mogi pressed harder, his sharp gaze fixing on her with terrifying intensity as he probed deeper into the discrepancies. Laid out the facts relentlessly, questioning how an F-rank party could survive such a high-tier calamity while implying that a hidden power was at play. Pressed her further, but Sakiya simply cast her eyes downward, softly admitting that her memory of the encounter remained entirely hazy. Observing her uncertain response, the investigator confirmed her status as a C-rank healer and requested that she undergo a re-evaluation of her abilities. Meanwhile, Takashi pondered the situation, well aware that he could not explain to Sakiya or the authorities that he had used the dew of Yggdrasil to cure her, lest it reveal his secret capabilities. While waiting to express his gratitude to Sakiya, Takashi received his payment, a staggering sum for 10 magic stones, and reflected on the immense financial return of his dungeon earnings. As Sakiya completed her processing and departed with the staff, Takashi caught up to her, calling out her name to intercept her before she left the facility. Reunited in the hallway, Takashi admitted he feared she had already left, while Sakiya explained that processing her required quota paperwork had simply taken longer than expected. Feeling hungry after the long ordeal, Takashi seized the opportunity to invite her to enjoy a meal together at a nearby family restaurant. Soon after, the two settled into a cozy booth at the diner, preparing to speak candidly in a relaxed environment. Sakiya immediately apologized for seemingly avoiding him earlier, clarifying that she had felt guilty about harsh words spoken previously rather than holding any ill will. She expressed remorse for doubting his hidden skills and hurting him, but Takashi quickly brushed it off, urging her not to dwell on past misunderstandings after all she had done for him. The tender, relieved smile, Sakiya acknowledged Takashi's genuine kindness and thanked him for protecting her during their perilous descent into the fifth layer. Their quiet conversation was pleasantly interrupted as the server delivered their hot meals, a hamburger steak and cheese risotto, much to Takashi's delight. They enjoyed their dinner side by side in the restaurant booth, savoring the comforting food and easing the residual tension from the dungeon. Between bites, Sakiya watched Takashi intently, touched by his straightforward, warm nature as they shared the meal. After finishing their meal, the pair walked outside under the night sky, satisfied and looking forward to speaking again whenever time permitted. She gently declined his offer to accompany her, offering a quiet farewell as she started up her scooter, leaving him to ponder whether her companion might take offense if he tagged along. A parting smile remained vivid in his mind, filled with sincere appreciation for all his assistance throughout the day. He stood frozen on the sidewalk in utter astonishment, wondering if she had somehow received a rank promotion without his knowledge. As he navigated his own scooter through the streets moments later, a silver minivan abruptly swerved into his path, forcing a violent collision that threw him onto the pavement. He pushed himself up off the ground in outrage, shouting at the reckless driver who had parked right in front of his wrecked vehicle. The attacker stepped out of the vehicle, revealing himself to be Sato, who immediately began barking insults and belittling him for hanging around their team member. Sato grabbed him roughly by the shirt collar, violently pulling him forward while demanding that he hand over all the magic stones he had taken. He remained remarkably composed in Sato's grip, quickly deducing that the arrogance stemmed from an incomplete C-rank dungeon run, even as his assailant screamed at him to obey without question. Sato threw a wild, telegraph punch aimed directly at his face, cursing him as dead weight and accusing him of stealing valuable stones to clear his personal debts. With effortless precision, he intercepted the blow and twisted Sato's arm behind his back, forcing the bully to cry out in agony just as a system message alerted him to the acquisition of the unarmed combat skill. Defeated, bully scrambled back into his minivan and sped away into the traffic, shouting furious threats out the window as he fled. He watched the vehicle disappear, analyzing how easy it had been to predict the attack and pondering whether his heightened reflexes were a result of his level increase or his newly unlocked skill. Back at his residence, he stuffed his massive backpack full of monster materials, wondering how he would manage to carry such an enormous load of killer bat wings and hellhound fangs. Upon initiating the world transfer, he materialized fully equipped outside his lodgings, startled to find Helen waiting for him at the base of the stairs. She turned around to face him, her revealing adventurer outfit catching him entirely off guard as she greeted him warmly. She effortlessly produced a bulging sack directly out of thin air, prompting Takashi to marvel at her dimensional magic. Curious about his own potential, he eagerly inquired whether he might be able to harness such spatial abilities himself. Striking a dramatic pose, Takashi struck the air in an attempt to invoke spatial storage commands, explaining that he was trying to test if subspace magic would respond to his call. Helen peered closely at him, clarifying whether his true goal was simply storing items within an inventory space. He promptly dashed his hopes, explaining that no spell book or skill scroll exists that grants subspace storage powers. Undeterred, Takashi asked if there was any alternative method to achieve it, and Takashi pressed her on how she acquired the ability herself. Helen casually revealed that it was an innate talent she was born with. Devastated by the news, Takashi slumped in disappointment, wondering aloud if raising his level might eventually unlock it. Suddenly remembering an alternative, Helen raised her finger as an idea struck her, announcing that there was indeed a method he could use immediately. Takashi's eyes lit up with renewed hope as he pleaded for her to tell him. Taking his hand, she declared it was time to move forward into the deep corridor ahead. Caught off guard by the sudden hand-holding, Takashi hesitated, asking what exactly they were going to fight. Further down the stone corridor stood a grand, ornate treasure chest bound in iron straps and heavy rivets. Helen asked him to confirm if that object lying ahead was indeed classified as a monster. Takashi confirmed her suspicion without hesitation, identifying the suspicious chest waiting ahead as a dangerous. Standing before an ornate, locked treasure chest set in the middle of the stone floor, the companion casually suggested taking it on, prompting Takashi to wonder how they were meant to fight it. Handing over a newly crafted weapon, she explained that she had processed the giant centipede's fang into a formidable dagger, granting a massive bonus to attack power. Surprised by how quickly she had finished, Takashi marveled at her crafting speed as she proudly smiled back. Inspecting his status window, he noted the weapon's special effect. The centipede fang dagger possessed a chance to paralyze enemies upon landing an attack. Curious about subspace magic, Takashi asked if anyone could use it to store items, to which she confirmed it simply allowed storage, before questioning how a mimic would attack once opened. The moment the lid unlatched, a swirling vortex of shadowy ribbons burst forth from the chest with blinding force. Stunned by the sudden force, the horned girl realized that opening the container dragged victims directly inside, leaving no choice but to fight from within. Reaching out in panic as the spatial distortion consumed them, Takashi could only gasp as everything around him turned white. The blinding flash faded. He found himself standing in an empty, mist-shrouded domain, facing a hooded figure that mirrored his exact posture. Staring in disbelief at the masked adversary before him, Takashi realized the foe bore his exact eyes and armor. Without warning, the copy lunged forward with explosive speed, forcing Takashi to instantly draw his blade and cross steel in a furious clash. Backing away to assess the threat, he reasoned that this true form of the mimic had completely copied his stats, skills, and equipment. Determined to gain the upper hand, he lunged forward to strike first, driving his blade straight at the duplicate. However, the shadow effortlessly matched his movement and activated the short-range spatial transfer skill to vanish into thin air, reappearing right behind him. Before Takashi could react, the copy struck him down with a paralyzing blow, leaving his body completely frozen by the centipede fang's copied effect. He knew he had to escape immediately, realizing that using his otherworldly transfer skill was his only option. A prompt appeared before his eyes, asking if he wished to return to Earth. In an instant, the dark dungeon dissolved into the quiet, familiar skyline of modern human civilization. Struggling against his own body, He monitored the digital clock ticking past 7 minutes and 48 seconds, wondering how long this debilitating paralysis would hold him helpless. As the clock reached 7 minutes and 49 seconds, the rigid stiffness suddenly vanished from his limbs, confirming that the paralysis lasted just over a full minute. He reflected on the centipede Fong's power, noting that while the exact activation rate of its paralyzing effect remained uncertain, it was undoubtedly an exceptionally formidable skill. He recognized his own flaw. Assuming he could always flee using world transfer had created a weakness in his spirit, allowing the mimic to duplicate him. Yet, through overcoming fiercely dangerous battles, he had truly grown stronger. Resolving never again to adopt a mindset focused on running away, he reactivated his skill to plunge right back into the dungeon battle. Reappearing inside the chamber, he drew his weapon and scanned his surroundings, demanding to know where his copy was hiding. Instead of a dangerous enemy awaiting him, only a harmless, melted blob lay motionless across the stone floor. Perplexed by the strange sight, he poked the creature with his blade, wondering if this simple slime had been the mimic's true form all along. System notifications suddenly flashed into existence, announcing that the mimic was officially slain, granting him an immense sum of experience points, a C-rank magic stone, and a spatial inventory ring. He examined the fallen loot, confirming that defeating the mimic's true slime form had successfully resolved the deadly encounter. Rejoining his companion, he discussed the newly acquired ring with Helen, who explained that the artifact granted the ability to store items within an isolated subspace. She instructed him to bind the item by placing his blood upon the ring, asking which finger he intended to wear it on. With quiet anticipation, he slid the glowing ring onto his hand, ready to claim ownership of the powerful spatial magic. He focused his thoughts on the ring, triggering its interface to display his inventory list. A system pop-up materialized before his eyes, confirming that a simple mental command was all it took to access his stored possessions. Browsing through the weapon entries on the floating menu, he selected a specific short sword. Reaching into the dimensional portal that opened before him, his fingers wrapped tightly around its hilt. The item screen detailed the stats of the demon short sword, showing an impressive attack power increase of 300 points. He explained to his companion how selecting an item from the pop-up allowed him to pull it directly out of the spatial pocket. With a fluid motion, he drew the jagged blade completely out into the open air. Inspecting the newly retrieved weapon, he marveled at its dark, menacing design and the raw power radiating from its edge. His test complete, he turned to depart, bidding his companion farewell for the time being. She raised her hands in protest, pouting slightly as she asked if they couldn't take a break from leveling up for the day, explaining she had errands to run in the town of Lumel. He offered a compromise, proposing they meet up later that evening for just 2 hours of training, to which she agreed before promising to meet him tonight. Parting ways near the outskirts, she watched him walk off while trees rustled gently around the path leading toward the town. As they walked, he voiced his concern about her staying alone in the forest, but she reassured him that monsters would not attack her. Pondered her words, wondering if her demon heritage was the reason monsters left her undisturbed, while she stood silently under her dark cloak. Turning to his modern home on Earth, he searched through his room until he found his trusted backpack sitting beside the bed. He began organizing his provisions, using the ring's interface to categorize and store his modern supplies along with monster materials collected during his dungeon crawls. With his inventory neatly organized, he prepared for his next transition back into the other world, confirming the destination prompt on his menu. Materializing back in the dense forest, he barely had a moment to catch his bearings before a ferocious wild boar monster burst from the thicket, charging straight toward him. He did not hesitate, swiftly sidestepping the charging big boar and delivering a decisive strike with his newly acquired blade before the beast could react. The massive creature collapsed to the dirt with a heavy thud, sliding along the forest floor into total stillness. The system message confirmed the defeat of the big boar, awarding him 2,600 experience points alongside an F-rank magic stone and boar meat. He wondered why an F-rank monster had been so unusually large. Suddenly, a heavily armed warrior woman stepped out from behind the brush. Accusing him directly, the fierce swordswoman claimed he had stolen her party's big boar kill and demanded his immediate attention, leaving him completely bewildered by the sudden confrontation. Turning back toward the tree line, she called out to her party members, revealing a diverse group of 4 women who gathered behind her, as well as calling for someone named Kai's to join them. Extravagantly armored male warrior stepped forward with a confident smirk, mockingly praising the lone swordsman for having the nerve to steal prey from his cute party member. Standing arrogantly before the hooded girl and her companion, the self-proclaimed strongest adventurer demanded a full explanation for her recent conduct. She nonchalantly tossed a pouch back, casually remarking on an unexpected monster encounter, while the surrounding onlookers whispered about her suspicious attire. Unimpressed by her dismissive attitude, the haughty warrior declared that anyone apologizing to him must display proper humility. The sudden, violent movement, he reached out and forcibly ripped away her dark hood, revealing her hidden features to everyone present. Sudden burst of magical force flared up in response, throwing the arrogant leader off balance as his companions cried out in shock. Tossing down a few healing potions as a mocking apology, she slipped away, leaving the humiliated warrior gritting his teeth in utter fury. 3 days later, Takashi finally returned to the city of Rumel, accessing his storage inventory while wondering about the safety of his companions. Navigated through the bustling, familiar stone streets of the city, making his way toward the guild's medical quarters. Upon stepping inside, Mateo greeted him with relief, relieved to see that Takashi had made it back unharmed after his sudden absence. They sat down to discuss the recent turmoil, reviewing the strange circumstances surrounding the underground arena and the forced monster battles. Looking around the room, he noticed someone missing and inquired about Aria's current whereabouts. Explained that she had gone out on a hunt, prompting the young elf girl to urgently ask Takashi for details regarding the mysterious hooded woman's physical features. Described her youthful appearance, jet black hair, and the sheep-like horns curving from her head, leading the elf girl to identify her as a member of the demon race. Young elf revealed that she had traced residual magical energy in Takashi's room, pressing him to confirm whether the mysterious woman possessed heterochromatic eyes. With wide, astonished eyes, she gasped in realization as Takashi confirmed that the woman's left eye was yellow-green, while her right eye shone bright red. She listened quietly as Takashi praised her impressive deduction, though the young man was left deeply shaken by the revelation, accidentally dropping his tea dish in shock. Desperate to prevent any further danger, she took hold of his hands and pleaded to guard his room starting that very night, leaving him completely flustered by the sudden proposal. As he frantically tried to decline such an improper arrangement, she leaned in close, insisting that he was still at high risk of being abducted once more. Before their intense conversation could continue, a heavy crash echoed from the doorway as someone burst into the room. Aria rushed in with dramatic tears, exclaiming how worried she had been since his mysterious disappearance. After calming down, she inquired if he had any loot to sell at the guild or local shops, while Takashi quietly pondered why the mysterious demon woman had targeted him in the first place. And Takashi casually activated his dimensional ring and summoned the word inventory. Aria, Noemi, and the old man recoiled in utter astonishment at the magical display. He explained that inventory rings were legendary artifacts usually restricted to high-tier adventurers unless granted through special transfer. Kashi revealed that Helen had given it to him, unaware that such mimic-dropped rings held a microscopic drop rate and were worth a fortune of hundreds of millions of gold coins. Hearing him casually mention Helen by name sent Aria into a fit of jealous suspicion, demanding to know just how intimate their encounter had been. Attempting to change the subject, she ushered him toward Burin's tool shop to appraise and sell the monster materials they had gathered. As they walked, she leaned in to whisper a stern warning, advising him to keep his ability to use an inventory ring a strict secret from outsiders. Moments later, the pair arrived at Burin's tool shop, stepping inside to complete their trade. After turning in the materials for a handsome payout of 100,000 gold coins, Takashi offered to treat Aria to lunch, instantly restoring her bright mood. They sat together in a bustling tavern, sharing a meal and enjoying a rare moment of peaceful rest amidst the lively atmosphere. He enjoyed a quiet meal with his companions, savoring the steaming plates of food set before them. As they ate, nearby voices caught their attention, discussing an urgent quest to escort a merchant to the sacred tree kingdom of Alf for 2 million gold, the exact destination Noemi wished to visit. Rumors detailed a wealthy merchant seeking skilled guards for a perilous 4-day shortcut through the Black Forest, a treacherous region teeming with dangerous monsters over level 40. Overhearing the high-level requirement, nearby adventurers dismissed the contract as suicide, but Arya eagerly suggested that their group accept the escort request themselves. Considering the proposal, he realized the 4-day journey would perfectly fit his schedule back on Earth while fulfilling Noemi's heartfelt wish. The guild notice board, they examined the official request, posting offering 2 million gold, while the guild master voiced concern about the dangerous Black Forest route. Nearby, patrons warned against accepting the lethal contract, just as an arrogant voice interrupted the conversation, addressing Arya directly. Kai stepped forward boasting of a fateful encounter, but Arya coldly rejected his advances, prompting him to condescend toward Takashi and his low levels. Tension escalated between them. Kai's mockingly confronted Takashi, ignoring the guild master's pleas to take their dispute elsewhere. Fixing Takashi with a sharp glare, Kai's challenged him to settle the matter in the guild's training grounds, setting the stage for a confrontation. Gathered at the guild's outdoor training grounds, a crowd of onlookers watched as Kai stepped forward, announcing the rules of the wager. If the young newcomer could land even a single strike upon him, he would concede total victory. Whispers quickly rippled through the spectators, who were eager to see how the veteran adventurer would discipline the reckless new novice. Confident in his status, Kai's boasted of his level 41 rank as the town's strongest warrior, declaring the match would end in a single blow. Meanwhile, Takashi quietly reflected on his true level of 56, plotting to deliberately take a light hit to avoid drawing unwanted attention. As both combatants assumed their stances in the center of the ring, Arya watched from the sidelines with growing apprehension. Closing the distance instantly, Kai's lunged forward with a sharp mock praise for the youth's audacity in stepping into range. Instinct took over before Takashi could execute his plan, causing his body to automatically dodge the incoming strike, much to his own internal dismay. Realigning his footing, Kai's offered another opening, mockingly inviting the novice to try and strike him again. Grinning condescendingly, the arrogant swordsman taunted the youngster, asking if a level 1 novice was already trembling in fear. Frustrated by the persistent provocation, Takashi decided that dragging out the match was far too troublesome. Initiating a rapid exchange of practice blows, he seamlessly parried every assault, forcing Kai's to offer begrudging praise for his fluid sword technique. Gasps broke out among the onlookers, who suddenly feared the escalation of the bout might result in genuine harm. Driving forward with a decisive counter, Takashi maneuvered cleanly past his opponent's guard in a blur of movement. Shock gripped Kai's as a thin scratch appeared across his cheek. In his embarrassment and fury, his hand instinctively went to draw a lethal, real steel blade. Arya gasped in terror at the sight of live steel being drawn, while Takashi remained focused on the agreed conditions of the duel. Delivering a clean, solid blow, Takashi fulfilled the wager's precise condition, leaving the veteran defeated and the surrounding crowd in stunned silence. Having demonstrated his overwhelming strength in the duel, he was approached by a merchant named Dorum from the Blue Trade Guild, who offered him, Arya, and their companion a formal escort request to the Arl Divine Kingdom, while presenting his official trade permit. Accepting the assignment, the party prepared to depart for the Divine Kingdom alongside the merchant and their newly freed elven ally. Before embarking on the long journey, they stopped at an item shop to sell off collected magic stones and purchase essential supplies. Their trip to the shop proved lucrative, as the magic stone fetched a hefty total of 550,000 gold. Next, they visited a local blacksmith shop, where the master craftsman hammered away at freshly forged metal. Their newly acquired funds, he equipped himself with a sturdy steel sword and a set of fine silver chainmail armor. As they walked through town, Arya and Noemi discussed how easily he had defeated Kai's, marveling at his level 56 status compared to Kai's level 41. Arya expressed her amazement at his rapid growth, while Noemi warmly promised to remain by his side to guide him in the ways of adventuring. Later that evening, the group gathered inside a cozy room decorated with a welcoming banner to celebrate Noemi joining their journey. While serving tea, Noemi humbly insisted that fulfilling this request was small repayment compared to him saving her life from the bandits. Glancing downward, the elf girl hesitated before timidly asking if he would allow her to see his personal status screen. Her unexpected request took him by surprise, reminding him of how Ellen had once asked the exact same thing. He asked why she wished to see it, wondering to himself if she possessed the appraisal or insight skill, to which she offered to explain her reasoning once he confirmed it. Complying with her request, he opened his status window, displaying his level 56 attributes and modified stats, leaving Noemi wide-eyed in sheer astonishment. Seeing the extraordinary numbers, Noemi quietly confirmed her quiet suspicions, leaving him observing her reaction closely. He stood by as the young elf politely thanked him and requested that he dismiss his display screen. Curious about her reaction, he asked what she had managed to confirm, but she could only stare back at him in trembling disbelief, questioning who he truly was. The air in the room grew heavy and suffocating as the mysterious horned woman towered over the kneeling elf, her presence casting an immediate spell of dread across the chamber. Whispering beneath her breath, the horned woman identified the elf as the priestess of light. In turn, the wide-eyed elf gasped in horror, recognizing the ancient entity before her as a ruler of the dark. Sudden, violent vibration rattled the atmosphere, catching the elf off guard as shock registered across her features. Desperate to protect them, the elf ordered the dark visitor to leave at once. Unmoved by the command, the horned woman simply scoffed at her physical restraints, noting that she had now located both the priestess of light and her intended target. The sudden burst of overwhelming physical force, the demonic warrior shattered the heavy chains binding her arms, declaring that no mortal restraint could ever hold her. Completely bewildered by the sudden chaotic turn of events, the young man struggled to comprehend what was unfolding before his eyes. Beside him, the elf stared in utter dread, recognizing the true identity of the dark sovereign standing in their midst. Ereshkigal, the demon king. With an impassive expression, the mysterious woman quietly asserted that she was not Demon Lord Ereshkigal. Because of this bold declaration, the young man accused her of spouting a blatant lie, though the elf maid quickly stepped in, pointing out there was no logical reason for her to deceive them. Overwhelmed by the sudden escalation, he held out his hands to halt the conflict, demanding to know what this demon lord was and why the two were intent on fighting. While the hooded woman reiterated that she harbored no desire to fight, the elf urged him not to listen to the ruler of darkness, insisting he was the sole hope summoned to save this world. Driven by conviction, the elf girl began gathering her magical power to prepare for battle. Seeing the magic flare, he desperately shouted for everyone to freeze once more before violence erupted. After separating the two and asking the elf to share the world's history, she recounted how 500 years ago, Demon Lord Ereshkigal united the scattered monsters to destroy the realm. In response to that ancient catastrophe, the creation goddess Ashura summoned a legendary hero from another world to strike down the threat. Although the hero grew rapidly in strength and succeeded in binding the demon lord with massive chains, he exhausted his very life force in the process, leaving her merely sealed rather than slain. Listening to the legend, he sought clarification from the elf on whether she believed the seal had finally broken, even as the dark-haired woman repeatedly denied being the villain of lore. The elf explained that the enemy had likely not fully recovered her power yet, prompting the accused woman to clarify once more that she had no interest in seeking any such revival. Probing deeper, he asked why she was so certain of her identity, prompting the elf to describe the legendary demon lord as a demon woman with pitch-black hair and heterochromatic eyes of red and green. She added that virtually all demonkin possessed white hair, making black hair and two-toned eyes unique to Ereshkigal, before revealing she had also received a divine revelation from Goddess Ashura. Divine message foretold that darkness would return alongside the demon lord, and that the savior summoned from another world to defeat her was none other than the young man standing before them. Hearing this grand prophecy, he clutched his head in absolute disbelief, screaming that it was completely impossible for a mere F-rank adventurer like himself to be the hero. He stood wide-eyed as Noemi explained how his status revealed extraordinary growth rates, 100 times that of normal adventurers, confirming his unique ability to traverse different worlds. She offered to give him a chance, prompting him to wonder if the divine revelation from the goddess Ashura was meant to lead him towards saving this world. Noemi revealed her true title as Noemi Irug, the third Miko of light from the Holy Kingdom, whose divine songs could weaken monsters across the land. And Takashi inquired about her twin sister. Noemi solemnly explained that her sister had been chosen for succession over her, leaving her trapped in the mountains. Pondered the grim reality that her twin sister had been framed and trapped following the unresolved princess assassination incident. As their conversation reached its conclusion, Noemi expressed her deep gratitude while emphasizing the urgency for Takashi to raise his level as quickly as possible. Turning to leave, Helen urged them to move forward, pointing out that humanity faced two stark choices: be defeated by darkness or defeat it themselves. She suddenly insisted that Takashi needed to raise his level further, causing Noemi to react in suspicion and question if Helen intended to prevent his growth. Helen coolly noted that Takashi's level 56 was far from sufficient, reminding them that she was currently not the Demon Lord. Understanding the necessity, Noemi agreed to accompany Takashi on his quest to level up. Together, the trio set off down the hallway to continue their treacherous descent. They navigated deep into the colossal, vine-covered stone ruins of the labyrinth. Upon reaching the 45th floor, the shrine interior of Goddess Ashura, Noemi recognized the sacred surroundings where priests of light frequently gathered. Noemi urged Takashi to push all the way to the 100th floor to meet Goddess Ashura, but Helen interjected with a shocking declaration that reaching the goddess would lead to immediate destruction. Helen affirmed that while she herself would not perish, their journey toward the goddess was mysteriously aligned with an inevitable demise. She countered Takashi's hopeful suggestion with a harsh truth, explaining that direct teleportation to the 100th floor was impossible because floors beyond the 80th remained sealed. Reviewing the layout of the upper levels, the party noted that powerful gatekeepers guarded the threshold beyond floor 50, requiring them to clear each level manually. Suddenly, a colossal monster known as a walking vine loomed over the shrine grounds, prompting the masked warrior to step forward with drawn blades. A blink of an eye, she sliced through the monstrous plant in a single decisive strike, securing rare materials and a massive gain in experience points. Without slowing down, the hooded fighter moved like a whirlwind across the battlefield, systematically shredding every aggressive tendril that dared to attack. Surrounding courtyard soon fell quiet, littered with the severed remains of the defeated plant creatures. Heavy rumble echoed across the ruined divine domain as the area was cleared of hostile threats. Standing quietly behind the front line, Noemi stared in absolute awe at the overwhelming martial prowess on display. Exhaling a weary breath, Takashi admitted how taxing the continuous combat was despite their swift victory. The elf maiden stepped closer, promising to channel her sacred light art to ensure no lasting injuries would harm him. Glowing status interface manifested before him, revealing that his level had risen to 57 along with significant stat increases, while Noemi gathered the valuable loot off the floor. Recognizing that nighttime had arrived, Takashi proposed calling an end to the day's expedition so they could rest before tackling the deeper floor tomorrow. Moments later, the party safely teleported back to the quiet comfort of their private living quarters. Gently reminded Noemi to rest early for another demanding day ahead, to which she bowed in polite agreement. Respectfully turning his back so she could change into comfortable clothes, Takashi wished her a good night, which she returned with a radiant, warm smile. She insisted on sitting quietly beside him, offering to keep watch throughout the entire night so he could rest peacefully. He gently countered that sitting on the hard floor would hardly allow her to relax. Looking at her delicate expression, he softly called her name, appreciating her earnest desire to help. Smiling warmly, she offered to use her healing power to lift all his fatigue away. The following morning, the door latch clicked open quietly from the outside corridor. Arya opened the door to greet him, only to stop dead in her tracks in pure horror as she found both the young elf and Ereshkigal curled up onto the sheets with him. A piercing scream echoed out of the room. Sudden commotion shook the entire guild in, leaving onlookers outside in sheer bewilderment, while he groggily rubbed his eyes and offered a casual morning greeting. Overwhelmed with dramatic betrayal, she sobbed loudly, lamenting how foolish she had been to trust him. Shortly after the morning chaos settled, the party gathered at the courtyard where the merchant's merchant carriage awaited them for their upcoming escort job. Formally introduced the newly freed elf girl to the client and her fellow companions, prompting her to offer a polite and gracious bow. Before they could depart, Kais made an uninvited appearance, boldly declaring that as the town's strongest adventurer, he would personally ensure the safety of the entire expedition. Smirking arrogantly, the self-proclaimed elite explained that he had volunteered to join the job out of concern that novices might drag the mission down. Behind him stood his trio of female party members, remaining poised and silent as he flaunted his authority. As the preparations wrapped up, Arya whispered her annoyance regarding Kais's unbearable personality to the client, though the merchant reminded them that the high compensation remained unchanged. With all travelers aboard, the heavy horse-drawn wagon set off along the dusty road heading toward Arlf. Reviewing their route inside the carriage, they confirmed they would spend the first night near Ganda village beside the Black Forest before pressing deeper the following day. He and his companions pressed forward, their wagon line stretching across the desolate road toward the divine tree kingdom of Arlf, which they expected to reach on the afternoon of the fourth day. Despite the unexpected complications that had arisen, their long journey had officially begun. Carriages rolled along the dirt road, making steady progress toward the sacred borders of the Alf divine kingdom. During the journey, a low-level ice creature crossed their path, only for Kais to obliterate it with an excessively dramatic display of power. By evening, the party arrived at a nearby village and gathered in the local tavern, raising their tankards to celebrate the successful first leg of their journey before retiring for the night. Upon returning to his guest room, the young adventurer was startled to find Helen resting comfortably right on top of him. Pointing accusingly at her, he demanded to know why she was hiding in his room, reminding her of their earlier agreement. Suddenly, the light elf priestess strode forward with a bright, confident smile, welcoming back the dark ruler. She declared her unwavering devotion to protecting him, casually revealing that her spirit magic allowed her to monitor his every move 24 hours a day, much to his utter dismay. Arya teased the priestess for her voyeuristic habits, but Noemi vehemently denied it, explaining that her spirit blessings would enable them to defeat high-level monsters on lower dungeon floors. Reaching the 57th level of the Alf Divine Kingdom's inner dungeon, the trio stepped amidst ancient stone ruins. The elf priestess explained that venturing into such dangerous depths was necessary, as hostile factions might be plotting against him under the guise of training. Bestowing her divine spirit blessing, she surrounded her companions with radiant particles of light that nullified all incoming status afflictions. Suddenly, a massive level 57 Minotaur charged out from the shadows, unleashing a deafening roar designed to paralyze invaders with sheer terror. Because of Noemi's spirit barrier, the monster's fear spell instantly failed, allowing Helen to leap forward and strike without hesitation. The beast paralyzed by centipede venom, she delivered a rapid succession of lethal blade strikes, whittling down its countdown timer in seconds. Mighty Minotaur collapsed into dust, leaving behind a massive gain in experience points alongside a rare magic stone and skill scroll. He watched silently as Takashi inspected the newly dropped skill scroll from the defeated monster. After receiving word that everyone was unharmed, Takashi selected the skill Intimidation from the floating interface, successfully obtaining the ability to afflict opponents with fear using his voice. Noemi expressed her profound confusion, explaining that skill scrolls were entirely unheard of in this world, and asking how an otherworldly person like him could acquire abilities so effortlessly. Although Noemi apologized for her ignorance, Takashi reassured her that gaining skills so easily was actually a welcome advantage before realizing they would now have to face two formidable foes simultaneously. Before them stood two monstrous beasts, a terrifying Medusa at level 57 and a serpentine Delphine at level 57, both roaring with deadly intent. Kashi inquired if Noemi's divine blessing was still active, and after she confirmed that it remained effective, he decided to test his newly acquired intimidation skill against the oncoming monsters. Unleashing his battle cry, Takashi attempted to intimidate the beasts, but the system alerted him that his skill had been resisted as the monsters surged forward. Refusing to back down, Takashi charged into close quarters, skillfully dodging the razor-sharp strikes of the monsters while preparing his next counterattack. Activating intimidation once more, Takashi managed to inflict fear upon the Delphine, giving his party a critical 40-second window to strike while the enemy was paralyzed. Precise team coordination, Takashi and his allies completely nullified the Medusa's paralyzing gaze and delivered a brutal blow directly to the beast. Capitalizing on the paralyzing venom inflicted by their previous summons, Takashi pressed the attack with 80 seconds remaining to finish off the helpless monsters. Leaping directly onto the massive body of the Delphine as its fear began to fade, Takashi drove his weapons deep into its flesh with overwhelming force. Delphine struck back with a venomous tail swipe, but the party's defensive status instantly cleansed the poison, leaving Takashi completely unharmed. Marveling at the strength of Noemi's sacred blessing, Takashi swung his blade once more to deliver the decisive blow against the writhing monster. The final, devastating strike, Takashi severed the terrifying beast, shattering its monstrous form in a violent explosion of light and shadows. Standing victorious amidst the battle's aftermath, system notifications confirmed the defeat of both Medusa and Delphine, granting massive experience points and rare magic stones as Noemi voiced her relief. He stood alongside his companions as they collected the monster drops, including the scales and statuary, noting that his level had not yet increased. Throughout that night, the party pressed deeper into the dark, relentless dungeon, battling endless waves of formidable beasts. He continued fighting relentlessly until he finally reached level 58, his status window reflecting his growing power. Surrounded by the party, they inspected his newly updated status, taking note of his reach in a level 58 and high health pool. Puzzled by the Medusa statue drop, he questioned whether it was intended as a piece of equipment or something else entirely. He explained that the item acts as a single-use scroll capable of paralyzing targets under level 50 for 60 seconds, prompting further inquiry into its tactical worth. As he reflected on the title of Dark Ruler and the F-rank status, he pondered how the world treats those deemed low-rank despite their true capabilities. He addressed the companions directly, emphasizing that to reach higher levels, cooperation across all their unique skills was essential. He recognized that both the gear and protection provided by his allies had kept him alive through lethal encounters in the dungeon. Listening quietly, she observed him with a calm and thoughtful expression. Turning to her, he expressed his sincere gratitude, acknowledging how much stronger he had grown thanks to her constant support. She accepted his thanks, reminding him that the divine blessings they shared had repeatedly saved them all. Looking down the ancient stone stairway leading deeper into the depths, he realized he could no longer blindly follow instructions, but needed clear purpose to keep leveling up. He declared that moving forward, where neither light nor dark reigned, they would face the unknown together as a united party. Their combined strength and mutual trust, they stood ready to venture into the deepest layers of the abyss. With unyielding determination burning in his eyes, he raised a clenched fist and swore to reach the 110th floor of the dungeon, no matter what trial awaited. Reviewing the gathered loot, the tallies confirmed 515 Sirank magic stones alongside various beast scales and heavy axes. A quick mental calculation estimated the total value at a staggering sum. Surprised by the total figure of 16.48 million, he realized how lucrative the recent dungeon conquest had truly been after converting the monster parts. Examining a retrieved shell artifact, he agreed to refine it later before preparing to rest, reflecting on the chaotic turns of the previous evening. The calm smile, the dark-cloaked companion casually confessed that she had sung a special lullaby to put her allies straight to sleep, startling him with her unexpected candidness. Realization hit him hard, leaving him exasperated by the rogue woman's playful yet terrifying methods. Sticking her tongue out teasingly, she bade them good night, leaving everyone hopeful for a quiet and peaceful morning ahead. When morning arrived at the inn, he was caught completely off guard as his companion casually arose without her clothes, greeting him softly while tidying her hair as if nothing were amiss. Boarding a horse-drawn carriage bound for the Black Forest later that day, he turned to the young woman and inquired whether she wanted to raise her current level. She wondered aloud if her current level 10 status would be sufficient against the level 40 beasts lurking ahead, but but he reassured her that he would provide full support during combat. Interjecting into the conversation, their hooded ally showcased powerful high-grade escape items, including a Medusa statue capable of paralyzing foes below level 50 for a full minute. As the carriage rolled deeper into the shadowed canopy of the Black Forest, the group steeled their resolve for the upcoming training expedition. Turning stern, the veiled assassin firmly cautioned him never to travel alone into dark territory with the ruler of darkness. Continuing on foot through the dense woods behind the front vanguard, the young swordswoman expressed concern for the caravan's safety while noticing familiar details on their companion's gear. Noted with amusement how remarkably well the two women were getting along, despite their vastly different backgrounds. Suddenly, a colossal level 39 grizzly burst through the tree line with a ferocious roar, prompting him to step forward immediately to take command of the fight. He activated his intimidation skill, completely paralyzing the massive level 39 grizzly in fear for 2 minutes. As the monster stood frozen and confused by the sudden skill effect, he urged his companion to strike while the creature was helpless. Taking precise aim with her bow, the archer drew back her drawstring and fired an arrow straight into the monster's eye, bringing it down instantly. Her decisive blow eliminated the beast, earning her significant experience while providing passive assist experience to her partner. She gasped in sheer disbelief upon seeing her status update, realizing her level had surged instantly from level 10 to level 19. She continued deep into the forest to boost her strength further, systematically taking down red wolves, monitor lizards, and additional grizzlies. At the end of their hunting session, she reached level 26 and expressed her profound gratitude for his incredible support. Nearby, Kais and his arrogant party watched the duo's remarkable progress with mixed feelings of envy and interest. Upon returning to the campsite within the Black Forest, other adventurer parties gathered to discuss their monster kills and rank standings. As night fell, Kais proposed his plan for night watch duties, insisting on partnering up to keep guard over the campsite. Suggestion was met with immediate comical protest from the young woman, who adamantly refused to let him take watch near her. Despite the opposition, the schedule was arranged with set shift rotations mapped out on a clock dial for the night. Later in the quiet night, the guards swapped positions near the tents as scheduled, maintaining vigilance over the dark surroundings. While the rest of the party slept soundly inside the tents, he remained wide awake on guard duty under the crackling campfire light. Looking up at the night sky above the tethered horses, he quietly observed how even the constellations differed in this foreign realm. He stood silent in the dim forest, his ears catching a faint, sharp sound rolling across the clearing. Before he could react, a sharp projectile pierced his torso from out of nowhere, causing him to wince in sudden agony. Blood coughed from his mouth as the realization struck him that an enemy ambushed them in the dark. Collapsing onto his back, he struggled desperately for breath as his throat constricted and consciousness began to slip. Reaching out weakly toward the nearby tents, his failing voice tried to call for help. Rallying his remaining focus, he activated his world transfer skill, accessing his inventory interface to retrieve a potion and heal his mortal wound. Gasping as air returned to his lungs and his mobility restored, he knew he had to move fast to transfer back into action. Sudden scream pierced the night camp as a masked assailant attacked from the darkness. Arya rushed forward in panic, reporting that Noemi had vanished, prompting Takashi to hand over a magical item and urge caution. As the gravity of Noemi's abduction set in, system windows flashed before him, granting the critical insight skill to uncover hidden truths. Facing a heavily masked figure carrying a large sack over his shoulder, Takashi demanded to know the intruder's identity. The masked kidnapper narrowed his cold eyes, amused that anyone could detect his presence. Unsheathing his blade, the intruder watched as Takashi drew his weapon, preparing for an immediate confrontation. Noticing the bound figure inside the sack, Takashi confirmed Noemi's location and moved swiftly into combat position. Blades clashed fiercely in the dark, sparks flying as Takashi engaged the formidable kidnapper. He stood amidst the clearing, blade drawn, as Kais and his adventuring party spotted him from distance. The pompadour-haired leader eyed him with deep suspicion, questioning why he was lingering alone in such a dangerous area, while the mysterious masked warrior moved swiftly into position. Ignoring Kai's sharp command to halt, he retreated past the wooden gates and ducked into the shadows, making his way directly toward the bound elf girl. Kneeling beside Noemi, he gently asked if she was unharmed as the rest of the party looked on in confusion. Looking down at the fragile young elf, his heart sank at her weak, motionless state. Bloodied and battered from his battle, he cradled her carefully, softly speaking her name in relief that she was still alive. Suddenly, Kais loomed over him, resting a hand heavily on his sword hilt. The arrogant noble glared down with intense disdain, his eyes cold and full of malice. Kais aggressively demanded to know why he had abandoned his assigned lookout post, accusing him of cowardice. He fought back through his exhaustion, fiercely shouting that he had done no such thing. Before he could finish his sentence, Kais struck him across the face with brutal force, sending him crashing onto the dirt. The noble snarled in rage, blaming his departure for the disastrous ordeal the party had just endured. Lying on the ground with a bruised face and blood running from his mouth, he glared up at his attacker with quiet, burning resentment. Accusations flew through the camp as an angry party member demanded to know why Takashi had not alerted everyone after having his throat cut, questioning what he was hiding. Takashi remained silent, contemplating how the healing potion had erased all physical evidence of his mortal wound. Sensing the mounting hostility, his companions stepped in to defend him, insisting that he had never abandoned his post during the chaotic attack. Despite the defense, Takashi hung his head in heavy silence before Kais and the surrounding adventurers, accepting the weight of the suspicion. Refusing to offer elaborate excuses, he bowed deeply before the leader, openly admitting that he had failed in his duty as night watchman and offering his sincere apology. Looking down at the bowed youth, Kais acknowledged that taking responsibility directly was far wiser than attempting to explain away the unexplainable. However, a smirk crept on Kais's face as he reveled in the young man's humiliation, taking satisfaction in seeing his rival humbled. Turning his attention to the bound elven maiden, Kais stepped forward, ordering her to stay still while declaring that a complex magic seal collar was impossible for amateurs to dispel. Channeling his strength, he grunted with exertion as he attempted to break the collar. Yet his efforts left not even a single scratch upon the enchanted iron. Stunned that his prowess had failed to yield results, Kais recoiled in shock, only for Takashi to step forward quietly and request a chance to try himself. Dismissing the offer, Kais scoffed that any further attempt would be pointless and dangerous. But Takashi drew his blade, confident that his recent rise in level would be enough. With precise mastery, he struck the iron collar, shattering it cleanly in a flash without inflicting a single scratch on the terrified elf, leaving the entire party stunned. Free to speak at last, the elven maiden addressed the party, revealing that the true assailant had used a stealth skill to ambush her and force the collar onto her, and that it was Takashi who had driven the dangerous attacker away. Truth hit Kais like a physical blow as he realized that a mysterious, deadly intruder had indeed infiltrated their perimeter under cover of darkness. Takashi's honor fully restored, the companions rallied around him in admiration, brushing aside Kais's authority and urging everyone to let the matter rest. Later that night, as quiet settled over the campsite, Takashi encouraged the weary elf and his comrades to get some rest while he took up position near the burning campfire. Keeping a vigilant watch over the sleeping camp, he suddenly felt a subtle drop in temperature and turned sharply, gasping as a hooded figure materialized silently in the shadows right beside him. He stood at the break of dawn admiring a newly crafted weapon presented by the enigmatic hooded woman, who explained that the blade, forged from lethal monster fangs, carried a high chance of paralyzing and poisoning its targets on strike. Arya inquired about the previous night's mysterious encounter, realizing that the masked figure standing before them was indeed the very assailant who had confronted the priestess, leaving them to discuss her true identity and motives. Interrupting their conversation, Kais called out to inquire whom Takashi was speaking with, while Arya reminded the group to prepare for immediate departure through the dense forest as soon as breakfast concluded. Heavily loaded horse-drawn wagons rolled smoothly down the dirt road, entering the shadowed depths of the woodland. Suddenly, an abrupt disturbance made Takashi freeze in his tracks as he sensed an impending monster ambush ahead. As Kais remarked on the frequent creature encounters in the Black Forest, Noemi warned that a massive horde numbering over 10 beasts was approaching, prompting Takashi to step forward and investigate the anomaly. Emerging from the trees, a hulking reptilian commander clad in intricate plate armor bellowed a guttural challenge to the human travelers. Astonished that the beast possessed the ability to speak human tongue, Takashi turned toward Arya, only to find her visibly trembling with deep unease. Overwhelmed by the staggering size of the enemy forces, she pleaded desperately with Takashi to turn back and flee with her. Refusing to retreat, he reassured her that he would hold the line using the Medusa statue to paralyze lower-level foes, urging Noemi to bestow a protective blessing upon him before the clash. The armored reptilian warlord cackled menacingly, declaring his intent to slaughter every human in sight without mercy. Dismissing the creature's threat with arrogant confidence, Kai's asserted that taking down the leader would break their ranks, urging the rear spellcasters to finish their chants quickly. The high-pitched incantation, Noemi summoned jagged shards of ice that rained down upon the advancing monstrous front line. Shield raised high, Kai's charged directly into the fray with a battle cry, clashing head-on against the frontline attackers. However, his bravado was brutally crushed as the massive reptilian leader delivered a devastating blow that shattered his defense and sent him spitting blood to the earth. He lay groaning on the ground as the ferocious lizard man sneered over him, taunting the fallen adventurers while burning heat radiated through their ranks. Suddenly, the monstrous warrior paused, its slitted eyes widening in sudden confusion as a powerful, oppressive aura washed over the battlefield. Kashi stepped forward decisively, releasing a crushing wave of intimidation that instantly pinned the creature in place, while instructing his companions to lie low. Moving swiftly, he tended to Arya and helped her up as a system notification confirmed the lizard fighter was thoroughly paralyzed with fear for 50 seconds. The cool expression, Takashi announced that the lizard hunt had begun, warning the remaining monsters to run for their lives if they wished to survive. Panic erupted among the ranks of the lizard men as they realized the overwhelming disparity in power and scrambled in desperation. Kashi launched forward like a shadow, cleaving through the lizard archers in a flash of dark steel as battle logs heralded his massive experience gains and loot drops. Without missing a beat, he pressed his assault against the lizard wizard, obliterating the magical threat instantly and securing yet another haul of rare items and experience. Executing a swift, lethal combination, he eliminated the last of the frontline lizard fighters, leaving a trail of fallen foes in his wake. However, the towering royal lizard warlord stepped forward, gripping a captive tightly and attempting to use her as a shield to halt his advance. Unshaken, Takashi applied his intimidation skill once more, inflicting terror on the royal lizard man and demanding to know who had hired them. Visibly trembling under the pressure, the warlord stammered out that he was merely following orders and begged for mercy, confused by the line of questioning. The snarl of desperation, the giant beast insisted it had no knowledge of anyone named Yasuda. Kashi absorbed the answer calmly, his eyes narrowing as he uttered a quiet acknowledgement before concluding the interrogation. A single, blinding stroke, he bifurcated the massive royal lizard warlord, freeing the hostage as the giant monster collapsed into pieces. Received a wave of system notifications immediately after the warlord fell, gaining over 63 billion experience points, a C-rank magic stone, a skill scroll, and acquiring the shadow clone skill. The threat eliminated, attention shifted to Kai's, who had collapsed onto the stone floor, prompting his allies to rush over and pour a restorative potion down his throat. Choking on the liquid, Kai's sputtered and coughed while Arya and the newly rescued elf girl looked on with deep concern for his physical state. Overcome by fatigue and lingering injuries, he slumped completely forward with a heavy thud, unable to remain upright. Looking across the broad expanse of the battlefield, Kai's marveled in utter shock at the dozens of slain lizard men surrounding them, asking aloud if a single man had truly annihilated the entire army alone. Completely drained of mana and energy, Takashi offered a faint apology for his inability to move, prompting a dry sigh of disbelief from Kai's. Twisting the spent warrior over his shoulder, Kai's hauled him toward the awaiting carriage and party, grumbling about how adventurers ought to plan ahead rather than passing out in the middle of a dungeon field. Staring up in a haze, the unfamiliar wooden ceiling came slowly into focus as consciousness returned. Taking in his surroundings, he sat up in a modest, sunlit bedroom, trying to piece together where he was. Memories of the brutal battle against the royal lizard man flooded back, prompting an immediate concern for the well-being of his companions. Stepping through the door, he was greeted by a boisterous hall filled with travelers and merchants who joyously celebrated his awakening as their savior. Caught completely off guard by the grand applause, he stared back in stunned silence. The leaders of the caravan expressed their profound gratitude, admitting that without his unexpected strength, they surely would have been wiped out. Following a grand feast, Takashi was summoned privately to Arya's room, leaving her heart fluttering with nervous anticipation. Instead of anything romantic, Takashi presented the bow dropped by the lizard man, asking how it compared to her current weapon. And Arya tried to draw the string. She found it far too heavy, prompting Takashi to realize that his lack of dedicated archery skills made it unusable for him as well. Arya offered to instruct him in basic marksmanship, agreeing that they should rest until their departure the following morning. Using his teleportation, Takashi returned briefly to his Earth apartment to clean up the dried blood left behind from his previous emergency return. He took a moment to perform mundane chores, airing out the room and plugging in his smartphone to charge. Before heading back to Istif, he decided to check his phone for recent news updates regarding dungeon developments. Reports detailed how an elite S-rank guild had successfully defeated the gatekeeper on the 91st floor of MT Fuji's Great Dungeon, opening a new path further below. Analyzing the breakdown of the dungeon layout, Takashi noted striking similarities between Earth's MT Fuji structure and the world of Istif. He stepped back into the quiet bedroom, offering a soft greeting upon his return, only to be met with a calm, welcoming gaze from the bed. As he reflected on his ongoing journey between worlds, he knew that allies like Ellen and the newly found Priestess of Light were waiting, bound by a shared destiny to stand against the encroaching darkness. Arya questioned whether he intended to use magic potions or spells requiring magic points, prompting him to clarify that although he could not cast spells yet, he had acquired a skill that activates using magic power. He went on to explain that beyond simple potions, specialized accessories exist that passively regenerate or increase maximum magic capacity. And Arya offered to craft a special magic restoring bandana for him. His eyes widened with eager surprise. Without hesitation, he reached out and grasped her hand, declaring they should set off immediately, leaving her startled by his swift resolve. Deep within the 62nd floor of the Ardent Temple dungeon, Arya outlined the 3 crafting materials required, beginning with the talons of an Impuza. After swiftly striking down the creature and securing its claw, they confronted a massive serpentine monster known as a beluda. The giant beast slain, its soft fur materialized as the second necessary crafting component. Targeting a flying imp next, they shattered the demonic creature to collect its core, successfully gathering all 3 required items. As Arya confirmed they had gathered every material for the bandana, a glowing surge of energy signified that his hard-earned efforts had culminated in a level increase. He paused to discuss the formidable dragon baby native to this floor, noting that its rare drop, Moon Dew, restores 50 magic points and can recover energy even if one is completely incapacitated. Suddenly, the fierce level 62 dragon beast appeared before them, brandishing sharp claws and powerful wings. Following a brutal clash, the defeated dragon vanished, leaving behind 10 vials of Moon Dew along with 10 high-grade B-rank magic stones. Lying completely exhausted upon the stone floor after reaching level 60, he collapsed into unconsciousness for 10 long minutes from sheer exhaustion. Having collected all the necessary materials, the companions prepare to head back. However, Helen suddenly halts, staring ahead with wide, shocked eyes as she realizes Takashi's room is completely gone. They arrive to find the entire and engulfed in roaring, uncontrollable flames, blazing wildly against the city skyline. As Takashi realizes their lodging is destroyed, Arya wonders if yesterday's Beastman attacker is responsible. Instantly activating his insight skill, Takashi spots a masked assailant fleeing through the smoke. He leaps into action, crossing blades with the stealthy intruder, while Kai steps up to guard Noemi amidst the sudden turmoil. Locking daggers with a masked foe at point-blank range, He forcefully demands to know who they are and why they are causing such destruction. The assailant detonates a blinding flash orbed directly before his face, overwhelming his vision in a sudden burst of light. Though temporarily blinded, he swiftly invokes his shadow body skill, summoning an autonomous clone to keep the adversary occupied. Shadow clone lunges forward with incredible speed, launching a fierce physical assault against the masked attacker. While his clone trades blows with the enemy, he realizes that even without sight, his shadow duplicate can fight unabated, granting him the crucial opening he needs. Exploiting the distraction, he slips behind the assailant, binding his arms and locking a sharp blade firmly against his throat. His foe completely restrained, he sharply declares that the battle is over and victory is his. Standing amid the burning ruins of the alleyway, the young swordsman declared his victory over the fallen assassin, who collapsed onto his knees in defeat. As a shadow clone dissolved back into him, notifications flashed before his eyes, confirming that the venom from his blade was swiftly draining the beastman's remaining strength. Weakened and desperate, the assassin demanded to know who he truly was and why he was interfering. Recognizing the beastman's feral nature, he pressed the dying assassin to surrender and reveal who hired him, offering a vial of liquid from the sacred tree that could neutralize the deadly poison. The assassin sneered at the offer, stating he had accepted the risk of death from the moment he undertook the mission. Yet the young warrior questioned if he truly wished to throw his life away so easily. Chuckling through his pain, the beastman realized such a capable fighter had been tasked with protecting the priestess of light, prompting the young warrior to ask if the client was indeed the priestess's sister. Desperately urged the dying man to drink the antidote to save himself. But the beastman instead offered a final request, asking him to take the pendant attached to his neck once his breath had left him. Blood gushed from the beastman's mouth as he choked on his final words, whispering a faint reverence to his sovereign before going completely still. Stunned by the sudden silence, the young warrior reached out in disbelief, calling for the assassin to open his eyes. Desperately tried to pour the potion into the lifeless beastman's mouth, pleading for him not to die. Cold, mechanical prompt resonated in his mind, announcing the defeat of Aqiel and asking whether he wished to steal the fallen enemy's skill. He remained on his knees beside the corpse, surrounded by his companions and local guards who arrived to inspect the scene. His eyes widened in hollow shock as the gravity of what had transpired sank deep into his conscience. Nearby, the authorities discussed taking custody of the infamous killer's remains and belongings, noting that his spirit had departed just as quickly as light fades. The body was strapped to a stretcher and carried away. He watched in silence, overwhelmed by heavy, unfamiliar emotions. Clenching his trembling hand into a tight fist, he came to the agonizing realization that he had taken a human life with his own hands. He stood quietly as Dorum questioned the mustache-wearing merchant about whether a necklace was found among the fallen man's belongings, but the official claimed no such item was located. Watching the authorities load the corpse onto a wooden wagon, the young adventurer maintained his silence from a nearby alley. Staring into the distance, deep in thought, he processed the heavy burden of his recent battle. The destroyed alleyway lay littered with debris, a silent testament to the violence that had just transpired. Prompted by the system display asking if he wished to claim Aqiel's abilities, he selected the option to confirm. Reviewing the list of available skills, Vitehall Strike, Assassination, and Stealth, he resolved to acquire the power that allowed complete concealment. Activating the newly acquired stealth ability, he slipped unseen past the busy bystanders and guards. Quietly approaching the rear of the transport wagon, he focused his gaze on the covered body of his fallen opponent. Reflecting on Aqiel's formidable techniques, he realized the assassin could easily have slaughtered them all had he truly intended to kill. Monitoring his rapidly draining magic points, he targeted Dorum and successfully executed Pickpocket, acquiring the thief skill in the process. Recalling how his previous encounters had unlocked various combat skills, he realized how each conflict had steadily expanded his repertoire. Using a stolen key, he unlocked a small chest hidden inside the carriage and retrieved the silver locket pendant. Deactivating his concealment once safely away, he stored Aqiel's necklace into his dimensional inventory. Opening the locket, he discovered a portrait of a young beast girl with cat ears, wondering if she was Aqiel's daughter. Piecing together the clues, he contemplated the dark conspiracy involving Dorum, the royal guard, and the true reason Aqil chose to die in combat. He woke up early the following morning as Arya greeted him brightly, mentioning that breakfast was already prepared. Shortly after, he returned the carriage horse to the driver, who thanked him for his work the previous night while remaining completely unaware that the necklace had been quietly taken from his possession. Rejoining Arya and Noemi near the estate, he presented the stolen locket, explaining that it belonged to the assailant, Aqil. Noemi inspected the piece with great interest, wondering if this meant Aqil was indeed connected to her missing sister, though solid proof still eluded them. Upon opening the locket, they discovered a hidden message detailing that a Beastman girl was currently being held captive in the dungeon beneath the royal palace of the Ariu Divine Tree Kingdom. Noemi expressed confusion over why a Beastman child would be imprisoned there, while Arya admitted she had never heard of such a thing. Remembering the dying Beastman's desperate plea for help, he felt the heavy weight of the fallen warrior's final wish. Holding the pendant firmly in his hands, he resolved that since he was the one who ended Aqil's life, he bore the responsibility to deliver that final wish to the girl in the dungeon. Their plan settled, the group called out to prepare their gear and move out toward their new destination. Standing resolute alongside his companions, he declared their intention to set forth immediately for the Ariu Divine Tree Kingdom. Far away, towering high into the clouds, stood the majestic capital of the Divine Tree Kingdom, built amidst monumental ancient arboreal structures. Inside the grand throne room, armored guards stood at attention before the royal dais where high-ranking figures gathered. Servant bowed low to report to Princess Noelle that Noemi and her party would soon be entering the kingdom's borders. Seated upon the throne, Princess Noelle uttered a soft, cryptic chuckle, anticipating the arrival of those who stepped into her domain. High above the sprawling forest, the majestic towers of the elven city rose against the sky, their colossal cap-like roofs echoing the ancient trees below. The grand gates, armored guards strictly monitored the steady line of incoming merchant caravans, ensuring every traveler was accounted for before entry. Recognizing the commander of the guard at once, Noemi gasped in sheer disbelief, while those beside her whispered about the heightened security surrounding all elves. She immediately offered a deep, formal bow of reverence, addressing the high-ranking officer with utmost respect. Stepping forward, the merchant Dorum introduced himself as the caravan's leader, prompting Commander Icilian of the Sacred Tree Guard Order to demand an explanation regarding their business with the elven lady. While the interrogation took place, the surrounding wagons remained halted along the paved thoroughfare. Kashi and Arya quietly inquired if Noemi knew the distinguished commander, to which she timidly nodded while the rest of the group pondered the situation. Nearby stood an opulent carriage, crafted with immaculate elegance and drawn by noble steeds, waiting to convey VIP guests. Uncertainty washed over the group as Dorum, Arya, Takashi, and Noemi each exchanged anxious, silent glances. Turning his sharp gaze back toward her, Commander Icilian formally requested that she transfer to his carriage for safe transport. She agreed to follow his request, but gently insisted that Takashi and Arya accompany her. The commander paused, pointing out that she was expected to travel alone, and inquired about the identities of her human companions. Arya introduced herself as an adventurer from Lumel, with Takashi promptly adding that he was her fellow adventurer. Sensing an extraordinary, ominous presence beneath Takashi's calm demeanor, Icilian faltered briefly. Noemi interjected, explaining that Takashi was her savior who had rescued her, asking forgiveness if his presence caused offense. Acknowledging the unusual aura emanating from the young man, the commander yielded and invited them all to step into the carriage. After bidding farewell to Dorum and assuring him that his reward would be settled at the guild headquarters, Takashi and Arya prepared to board the vessel into the inner city. He sat quietly as the boastful knight, Kais, prattled on to Noemi and Arya about his wealth, earning only disgusted grimaces from the young adventurer and the girls. As their journey through the city continued, Commander Icilian respectfully addressed Noemi, accompanied by an elven chief made to apologize for any past shortcomings. Inquiring about her mother, Noemi learned from the commander that Queen Noelle had been diligently handling state affairs, though her health had lately deteriorated, prompting questions about her twin sister's role. When Takashi asked about the Earl Kingdom enforcing restrictions on elven entry, Icilian politely deflected, stating he was not in a position to discuss such political matters. Carriage soon arrived at the magnificent central courtyard of the Elven Palace, where grand fountains spilled into wide stone basins surrounding the party. Above them towered the ancient castle itself, a breathtaking expanse of soaring spires woven seamlessly into giant white trees and dramatic mountain cliffs. They stepped inside. A tall, veiled elven figure emerged to greet Noemi, who gasped in immediate recognition of her regal presence. Escorted by the veiled noble and Commander Icilian, the group proceeded up the grand exterior staircases leading into the heart of the palace. Inside, Commander Icilian formally introduced Takashi and Arya to Minister Karak, explaining that the pair had rescued Princess Noemi in the human realm of Rumel. Led through soaring marble corridors, the party was informed that the royal princess was eagerly awaiting their arrival at the end of the hall. Doors parted to reveal a massive, high-ceilinged audience chamber, lined on both sides by rows of solemn elven dignitaries standing in formal attendance. Veiled figure ascended the central carpet toward the dais, announcing her return to the gathered assembly. Seated gracefully upon the high throne, the radiant elven ruler lifted her gaze, expressing her deep relief at seeing Noemi safe once more. Noemi bowed respectfully and credited her survival entirely to Takashi and Arya, identifying Takashi specifically as the brave soul who fought for her freedom. Noemi affectionately called out Takashi's name in front of the court. Commander Icilian erupted in shock, scolding her for addressing a commoner so casually before the throne. Barked out an order, cutting off the princess and directing the court attendants to escort Takashi and Arya to their quarters so the formal audience could conclude. Guided through the grand corridors, Takashi, Arya, and Noemi were shown into an opulent guest chamber, where the maid invited them to rest while further arrangements were prepared. Once left alone in the quiet room, Takashi collapsed onto the plush bed, exhausted from the whirlwind of events. As he stared at the ceiling, questions raced through his mind regarding the mysteries surrounding the Elven Kingdom and why Noemi had been targeted by bandits in the first place. Knock at the door shattered his train of thought, prompting him to sit up just as a royal figure stepped into the room. Kashi looked up in astonishment, momentarily mistaking the newcomer for Noemi due to her identical appearance. Visitor introduced herself as Noelle, Noemi's twin sister, explaining that their identical faces often confused guests, before asking about the purpose of his journey. She addressed him respectfully as a hero, offering her gratitude and urging him to speak freely without formal courtly restraints while in private. Kashi inquired why she called him a hero and how she came to know of his presence, to which she explained her role as the twin sister devoid of divine revelation. He recounted the ancient prophecy of dark forces rising once more and how a hero from another world was destined to descend to stem the impending catastrophe. Subtle, knowing smile graced her lips as she watched his reaction to the revelation. She emphasized that her sister carried the heavy burden of being the kingdom's sole priestess of light, making Takashi's casual and friendly presence vital to her well-being. She urged Takashi to continue treating Noemi with familiarity and warmth rather than stiff formality. Kashi listened quietly, analyzing her words and wondering if her affectionate concern for her sister was genuine or merely a rehearsed performance. Takashi asked if Noemi herself had spoken of him. Noelle gently deflected, leaving him to ponder the true motives behind the royal family's actions. He stood wide-eyed as energy visibly swirled around him, while Noelle confirmed that the power enveloping him was unequivocally the unmistakable aura of the prophesied hero. Seated across from her, he shifted the topic to inquire about Noemi, recounting how they first met at a bandit stronghold near Lumel, and asked if Noelle knew any details about how her sister had been taken from the royal palace. In response, she lowered her gaze with a somber expression, addressing him as the hero, while asking if her sister had mentioned anything suggesting her own involvement in the tragedy. Sitting in the ornate reception chamber, Princess Noelle leaned back and asked if her younger sister had mentioned any involvement on her part. Takashi sat across from her, carefully absorbing the weight of her words as the formal discussion unfolded. She reassured him that he need not be overly cautious, acknowledging that while it was regrettable, misunderstanding between sisters was a factual reality. Counting the incident from 10 days prior, Noelle explained how someone using her name lured Noemi out of the palace to a specific meeting point, resulting in Noemi falling into a trap and being abducted. Takashi noted that based on scarce eyewitness accounts, the perpetrator appeared to be an elf, which explained the recent entry restrictions into the Elven Kingdom. Continuing her tale, Noelle revealed a series of misfortunes. Queen Norn had fallen ill from exhaustion, forcing Noelle to rule by day as regent and safeguard the sacred tree by night. Although King Kurgan remained healthy, the sacred tree kingdom of Earl had traditionally been governed by generations of queens. As a servant knocked at the door to announce that dinner preparations were complete, Noelle addressed Takashi directly. She asked if it was true that he sought an oracle directly from the sacred tree Inanna. When Takashi confirmed it, she offered him a deal, promising to grant him that chance in exchange for a specific favor. Looking at him intently, she offered to grant him the opportunity he sought, setting the terms for their agreement. Exiting the chamber, Takashi found Arya waiting outside. When he mentioned that he could handle things on his own, she playfully teased him about his etiquette and insisted on accompanying him. Reflecting on his position, Takashi grappled with his lingering self-doubt. Despite having attained powerful stats, his mind still felt trapped in the mindset of an F rank who could achieve nothing, causing him to lower his head in deference before the royal presence. Later that evening, Takashi and Arya joined the grand banquet hosted inside the castle's opulent dining hall, surrounded by elven attendants and lavish decor. The banquet concluded in total silence, without Princess Noelle speaking a single word to anyone throughout the meal. Her distant and quiet behavior during the feast left an uneasy atmosphere among the guests. Arya pondered the complex political landscape. Noelle and Noemi were twin daughters of the current Queen Norn, while King Kurgan was the father. Meanwhile, figures like Commander Icilian guarded the realm, and key advisors held unclear positions in the court dynamics. Considering Commander Icilian's formidable strength as head of the Sacred Tree Knights, Arya realized it was best not to anger him, while also contemplating the portrait of Queen Norn and the captive beast girl hidden in the dungeon. Back in their private quarters, Takashi discussed Noelle's testimony with his masked alter ego, analyzing whether her statement contained any contradictions or if the rogue figure Ukuil fit into the abduction scheme. Arya entered Takashi's spacious guest room, commenting on how much larger it was than hers. She agreed that the banquet had felt uncheerful and noted that hardly anyone had eaten or spoken during the meal. She voiced her growing suspicion, pointing out that Princess Noelle's behavior remained deeply unnerving. Reflecting on their recent interactions, they realized that whenever anyone attempted to speak directly with Noemi, the princess had subtly stepped in to break up the conversation. It was bizarre for her to remain so detached after such a grave incident, raising the alarming possibility that Noemi was deliberately being framed. This realization painted a grim picture. Noemi was being systematically isolated from everyone, left completely alone to face whatever dark plot was unfolding. Gravity of the situation hit Takashi like a physical blow, his mind racing as the hidden motives of the Elven court suddenly began to fall into place. Deciding that they could no longer sit idly by, he resolved to go directly to Noemi's quarters, a plan to which his companion readily agreed. Approaching the attendant in the royal corridor, Arya requested to be taken to Princess Noelle's residence. However, the guard politely refused, explaining that Her Holiness was currently resting and had given strict orders that no visitors would be admitted under any circumstances. Intervening in the conversation, Takashi stressed that they urgently needed to deliver a message to the princess that night, asking if they could at least pass along a verbal note. Fabricated a cryptic message about an item left behind at the Black Forest encampment to draw the guard's focus, instructing her to inform the princess before quietly assuring Arya that they would head back toward their own room. Without warning, he activated his concealment ability right in front of the startled guard and a bewildered Arya, vanishing completely from sight. As the door clicked open, his disembodied voice instructed Arya to wait there for him while he slipped ahead undetected. Veiled in complete invisibility, he moved quietly past the oblivious elven guards stationed throughout the grand hallway. He monitored his magic reserves as they drained steadily second by second, realizing that with only one mana-restoring item left, his time to infiltrate the restricted wing and confirm whether Princess Noelle was truly inside was rapidly running out. Determining that prolonging the stealth reconnaissance was too risky, he navigated back through the guarded corridors toward his quarters. Entering the room, he deactivated his stealth skill with a quiet sigh of relief as he reappeared before Arya. Before they could discuss his findings, Helen suddenly materialized inside the room, casually greeting them and asking if he had been out practicing his stealth skills. She leaned in closely, warning him that his room was under constant surveillance by royal spirits, prompting them to head back and prepare to hunt a dragon puppy for moon droplets instead. He considered how the palace was guarded by special magical barriers and spirits, making traditional secrecy impossible within those royal walls. Believed that their conversations inside the room hadn't been overheard beyond the door, he wondered how she had managed to teleport into a place so heavily protected. Suggested returning to his room, first to talk with Arya, but she opted to stay behind and hiding to avoid being spotted by anyone passing by. Turning to the room, Takashi was asked by Arya if he had managed to meet Noemi, forcing him to admit that he was unable to do so after following a lady-in-waiting. Arya pressed him about how he had vanished earlier and when he had acquired such a skill, but he preferred not to reveal that he gained it by defeating Acneer. She questioned how they would leave the palace, prompting Takashi to explain that his invisibility skill drained MP rapidly, meaning he needed to hunt potion-dropping monsters nearby while planning to introduce Helen to her later. Arya pouted slightly, questioning if they would truly be all right, but Takashi reassured her that their levels had already risen significantly from grinding alongside Noemi and Helen. Looking down with a sullen expression, Arya lamented her low level and lack of special abilities, feeling completely useless in their current situation. Grabbing her shoulders tenderly, Takashi strongly rejected her self-doubt, reminding her how she saved him when he first arrived in this world and taught him the basics of adventuring. Their faces drew close in a quiet, intimate moment as Arya gazed up at him, her heart stirred by his heartfelt gratitude. Quickly breaking the mood with an apology, Takashi announced he would return in about 2 hours after taking a walk, leaving Arya flushed and flustered on the floor. Rejoining Helen outside, Takashi apologized for the delay, and together they set off toward the 62nd floor to hunt a dragon puppy for moon droplets. They ventured deep into the vast stone corridors of the Ard Divine Kingdom's 62nd dungeon floor, ready for combat. Handing him an MP-restoring bandana crafted from yesterday's gathered materials, Helen offered the useful item to Takashi, who examined his stats, showing level 60 strength. He realized that equipped with Helen's bandana, which automatically restored magic power every second, he could maintain shadow clones and concealment indefinitely. Harnessing this newfound capability, he activated his shadow clone skill to summon a shadowy duplicate beside them. Working in tandem, the shadow clone dropped from above, while Takashi struck from the front, taking down the level 62 dragon puppy in a single coordinated assault. He continued slicing through waves of dragon hatchlings, leaving the stone floor littered with defeated monsters. Panting heavily from the intense effort, Takashi paused to catch his breath. Their relentless hunt proved fruitful, securing 30 moon droplets along with 30 B-rank magic stones, while raising his overall status to level 63 with significant stat boosts. As Helen suggested concluding their dungeon run for the night, he called out to stop her, explaining that he had a personal request to make before they left. Holding up an open locket containing the image of a young beast girl, he revealed his desire to locate and meet. Descending into the cold stone depths of the dungeon, echoing voices of guards drifted up from the lower corridors. Deep within the passage, 2 armored sentries stood conversing near a rack of keys, mocking how Commander Isilian had been stripped of his pride and equipment in a single instant. Utilizing his stealth and pickpocketing abilities, Takashi slipped quietly past the heavy iron doors, his eyes set on locating the imprisoned beast girl. As he brushed past the guards unnoticed, one of the men winced in sudden confusion, completely unaware of the invisible intruder stepping into the shadows. Rejoining Helen near the cell blocks, Takashi quietly conferred with her regarding the unseen spirits monitoring the hallway, drawing parallels to his own previous chamber. She revealed that even while concealed in his stealth state, her senses allowed her to perceive the lingering spirits, humbly reminding him that while she possessed unique awareness, there were still tasks only he could accomplish. Directing her gaze down the dimly lit corridor, she subtly pointed out a specific target waiting ahead. Handing him a small artifact, she urged him to move quickly as the roaming spirits approached once more, while Takashi caught sight of an unusual figure down the passageway. Advancing silently down the desolate hallway, He approached the barred prison cell where the captive was held. Inside the darkened cell, a sharp feline spirit leaped defensively as the young beast girl locked eyes with his concealed form. Sensing his presence despite his invisibility, chained and sitting upon the stone floor, she demanded to know who was lurking outside, prompting Takashi to hold up a pocket watch containing a portrait of her childhood with her father. Though his stealth technique masked his physical form, she acknowledged feeling his distinct presence standing beyond the iron bars. Fixing him with a resolute gaze, she proudly declared her identity as Terina, daughter of the honorable warrior Akul, insisting she could never fail to recognize her father's signature skill. Deactivating his stealth ability to reveal himself, Takashi presented the locket and explained that her father had entrusted it to him, asking her to share the story of how she came to be imprisoned. Overcome with emotion, tears streamed down her face onto the precious artifact, as she tearfully asked whether her father had remained proud and honorable to the very end. She wept softly inside the dungeon cell, expressing her remorse that her father, Akul, had chosen to carry out his mission to the very end without taking a single life, wondering if he might have survived had he surrendered. Kashi gently reassured her that no apology was necessary, reminding her that once a warrior steps onto the battlefield, defeat inevitably carries the risk of death. Explaining that he had come specifically to fulfill Akul's final request, Takashi listened as she offered to share the story behind her imprisonment, while her father's spirit watched over them quietly. She began recounting the history of her nomadic beastkin tribe, explaining how they lived by following game across seasons without fixed settlements. Though human expansion and elven kingdom policies gradually forced changes upon their traditional lifestyle. Among those who preserved their ancient heritage were the Golden Fangs, a proud tribe led by her chief father, Akul. However, armored envoys from the Arl Divine Kingdom arrived, declaring the land to be under royal administration and demanding the tribe's immediate eviction. Unwilling to step down, Akul stood firm before the elven representatives, demanding to speak directly with their leadership to protect his people. Guarantee his tribe's traditional way of life, Akul was forced to forge a pact with the kingdom, repeatedly undertaking covert and dangerous shadow assignments. Word reached the elders that Akul had been captured during his mission. Outrage spread through the camp as they realized the kingdom was demanding the disbandment of the Golden Fangs. Attempting to prevent open conflict, Terina urged the elders to remain calm, offering to go directly to the queen to negotiate an audience on her father's behalf. Upon arriving at the capital, she was denied any meeting with the queen or her father, and was instead thrown into this subterranean dungeon. Piecing the timeline together, Takashi realized that her capture occurred shortly before Noemi's disappearance. Suspecting the kingdom held her hostage to force Akul's cooperation. Tears streaming down her face, the young cat girl looked up at him, pleading softly to be released from her chains. Agreeing without hesitation, Takashi instructed her to hold still as he produced lockpicks and prepared to undo the heavy iron bindings. Working swiftly and silently with his tools, Takashi picked the heavy lock, shattering the metal restraints and freeing her from the wall. He warned her that a guard station lay directly ahead, prompting her to ask how they could possibly slip past. Reassuring his companion, he produced a small magic cube and prepared to throw it to create a distraction and path forward. Activating their stealth and teleportation abilities, they vanished from the dungeon corridor just as guards passed by, reappearing safely near their hooded ally who was waiting outside. Moments later, the group made their way back to the Raging Giant Inn, where Mateo was sound asleep across the front counter until their sharp knocks startled him awake. Rubbing his sleepy eyes, the tavern keeper gasped in surprise upon seeing them return with a young cat girl in tow, demanding an immediate explanation for her presence. After agreeing to give them shelter without raising a fuss, the young beast girl bowed politely, introducing herself as Terina and expressing her heartfelt gratitude for his hospitality. As their hooded companion prepared to depart, Takashi asked everyone to pause, explaining that he needed to examine a mysterious set of markings inscribed on the collar. Shining a concentrated light through the metal piece, he projected a hidden string of ancient cipher symbols left behind by Akul onto the wall. The three of them stared at the glowing script in quiet awe, realizing that Akul had left a critical message meant specifically for his daughter. Memory embedded in the secret technique revealed Akul standing before the High Elven Council, receiving what was framed as a divine order directly from the highest authority. Kowal had realized with grim clarity that his assigned duty, to permanently seal away the Priestess of Light, was an operation on a far more sinister scale than any routine mission. Reflecting on the vision, they discussed the ancient secret art of the Golden Fong tribe, which allowed warriors to record absolute truth by expending a portion of their own life force. Erina clarified that the phrase supreme within her father's recording referred explicitly to Her Majesty, the Queen of the Elven Realm. Recorded memory concluded with the Elven Sovereign ordering the complete sealing of the Priestess of Light, who was bedridden with illness prior to returning to Arl. Shifting their focus back to practical matters, they discussed C-rank magic stones and inventory rings, with Terranah noting that her father had owned one himself. Realizing that inventory rings possessed an extraordinarily rare drop rate of 1 in 10,000, Takashi concluded that Ukuel must have been an exceptionally powerful and capable warrior. He stood alongside Helen as they prepared to depart, leaving Terranah behind in the room with the magic stones she so gratefully accepted. Turning around after they slipped away into the corridor, the cat girl stared at the empty doorway, stunned to find them already gone. Suddenly gasped, clasping her cheeks in realization. She gasped as she remembered that she had completely forgotten to ask for his name. Meanwhile, walking down the quiet hallway with Helen, Takashi offered his sincere thanks for everything she had done and pledged to work hard leveling up starting tomorrow. Went on to ask if there was any way he could contact her in the future, prompting her to pause and ponder the unexpected inquiry. Without a word, she reached up and gently took his face between her gloved hands, leaving him thoroughly bewildered by her sudden, close approach. Before he could react, she pulled him into a deep kiss, unexpectedly blowing a strange, dark smoke directly into his throat. As he recoiled in shock, a horrific, grotesque visage loomed over Helen's mindscape, desperately pleading for him to put an end to her. Flustered by the sudden proximity, Takashi stammered, asking what she had just done. Leaning in close, Ereshkigal explained with a gentle smile that she had established a mental path between them, allowing them to communicate telepathically whenever he simply thought of her. Testing the newly formed link, Ereshkigal asked if he could hear her voice, and he confirmed that her thoughts reached him clearly inside his mind. Delighted by the successful connection, she cheerfully announced that she was ready to go whenever he called for her. Takashi stood in awe, processing the silent voice that had echoed through his head moments before. Fully outfitted in the realm's sacred warrior armor, Takashi stood resplendent as a hero level 63, surrounded by attending elven priestesses ready to guide him to the inner chamber. Observing his newly acquired gear, the elven maidens marveled at the set effect granting complete immunity to status abnormalities, urging him to try a special toast prepared in his honor. As a graceful elf served him a goblet filled with sparkling liquid, Takashi accepted it graciously, wondering if it was a divine blessing, unaware of the sudden shock that awaited him as he drank. Stark warning system flashed in midair, signaling that he had just ingested a deadly poison. Panicking as sweat poured down his face, Takashi gasped in horror upon realizing he had been poisoned. Before panic could take root, a second notification illuminated the air, confirming the poison had been instantly purified. Princess Noelle looked on calmly, explaining that true holy armor purifies even the lethal venom of the desert serpent. Leading him further into the palace, Noelle announced their arrival at the sacred tree chamber, where Takashi marveled at the ancient pedestal and the ominous grandeur of the holy sanctuary. Standing at the center of the magic circle, Noelle declared her role as the Maiden of Light acting on behalf of the divine entity, instructing Takashi to close his eyes and listen quietly as she offered her hands in prayer. Glowing runes began to flare beneath their feet on the ancient stone floor, catching Takashi's eye with a faint flickering light. Columns of light burst forth from the magical seal, surrounding Noelle in a radiant pillar that illuminated the vast subterranean chamber. As the divine power faltered and faded away, Noelle gasped in disbelief, deeply embarrassed by the failure, while Takashi wondered why the sacred light refused to reach her. Turning her gaze aside, Noelle somberly revealed that her younger sister's health was deteriorating, asking if they could leave her in peace for the time being. She requested a little more time until the afternoon, explaining that there was someone she desperately wanted him to meet. Takashi remained silent, his gaze steady as he considered her request. Later, Takashi examined a small cubic artifact, realizing that with it, he and Arya could finally reach Noemi, even if it meant relying on the demon girl Erin's assistance. She contemplated the situation. It became increasingly obvious that the kingdom was deliberately concealing something critical from them. Establishing a telepathic link with Erin, Takashi coordinated their next move, instructing her to lead them to a location where Noemi might be held, while noting frequent suspicious movements around the West Tower. Navigating the stealthy approach toward the West Tower, Arya questioned if they were truly invisible, while Takashi reassured her to simply watch her footing. Stopping abruptly, Takashi warned her that a powerful elf presence was waiting just ahead, urging her to hold her position. Taking the lead, Takashi instructed Arya to wait behind while he moved forward alone to investigate the corridor. Suddenly, Commander Icilian of the Sacred Tree Knights materialized, swinging his massive spear to intercept the intruder. With lethal precision, Icilian thrust his spear forward, forcing Takashi to dodge swiftly in a high-stakes clash. Realizing Icilian was empowered by the sacred tree's dew, Takashi braced himself as the knight's strikes unleashed destructive shockwaves. Icilian boldly declared that Takashi stood no chance against him here, prompting Takashi to instantly cancel his concealment spell to face him head-on. Executing a swift clone technique, Takashi multiplied himself into 4 forms, surrounding the elven commander from all directions. But Icilian easily cut through the illusion, thrusting his spear straight into Takashi's chest with overwhelming force. Grasping the spear's shaft as blood dripped from his mouth, Takashi demanded to know Noemi's location, while Icilian vowed to protect the Saintess at all costs. As Arya cried out in horror, Icilian declared victory, only for Takashi to reveal a sudden counter-move, refusing to back down. As he remains engaged, Princess Noelle steps forward to command Commander Icilian to cease his attack. While Icilian lowers his weapon in response to her royal authority, Arya quietly offers her sincere gratitude to Elsa for intervening on their behalf. Icilian insists that Princess Noelle return to her chambers for her own safety, warning her that these intruders are dangerous figures from another world who must be taken into custody. However, Noelle firmly resists, questioning the true nature of his orders and noting that the boy standing before them is the hero summoned to save their realm. Kashi turns toward Arya, whispering a brief apology for remaining silent about his origins until now, though he admits that he possesses no real self-awareness or special status as a hero in this unfamiliar world. Directing his focus back to Icilian, Takashi questions whose authority led to Noemi's imprisonment, asking whether it was truly by the king's decree or a plot orchestrated by the scheming Minister Garrick. Presses Icilian further, asking if he was aware that Ukul, the Golden Fong, was coerced by Garrick into handing over his own daughter, Noemi, as a political hostage. Icilian ponders the revelation of Garrick's shadow manipulations, acknowledging the unsettling political games unfolding within the royal court behind closed doors. Kashi silently realizes he has accidentally let slip critical information regarding Terran Na's prison escape, while Icilian observes that both sides seem to share complex circumstances. Dressing Takashi as a hero, Icilian proposes a truce, suggesting that all 5 of them pool their knowledge and discuss the matter openly to reach a mutual understanding. Princess Noelle explains her urgent desire to visit the sacred tree room, emphasizing that as the Light Priestess, only she possesses the divine authority to interpret the Creator God's words and unlock the path to the dungeon's lower levels. Icilian points out the stern reality that the king remains trapped inside his room, rendering immediate passage to the sacred tree room virtually impossible. Posing a daring alternative, Takashi suggests sneaking out to rescue Noemi tonight and visiting the sacred tree room together, surprising Noelle and Arya with his bold initiative. Icilian marvels at Takashi's fearless audacity to propose such a scheme right in front of the officer in charge of Arlu's security. Yet he permits the group to proceed under his watchful eye. As night settles over the Grand Royal Palace, Icilian agrees to postpone their official duel until after Princess Noelle's pressing matters are fully resolved. Inside the sanctuary, Métis, an elite mage from Noel's inner party who defeated the boss on the 80th floor alongside another hero, stands ready alongside her companions as they prepare for the ritual. Joining the elite unit are Gable, a formidable dragonkin warrior proficient in fire magic, and Nika, a fierce tigerkin fighter capable of unleashing devastating holy strikes. Their temporary alliance forged, the command was given to proceed into the depths. Ascending to the 80th floor of the sacred tree, the party was immediately confronted by a terrifying adversary, a level 80 Naga with a skeletal cobra hood that loomed ominously over the precipice. As the monstrous creature reared back, a tense warning echoed out, urging the hero to remain vigilant and keep his guard up at all costs. High-ranking elven warriors and seasoned veterans clash fiercely with monstrous beasts, executing rapid spell work and precise strikes to immobilize skeletal vipers and winged gargoyles. Riding high on their flawless teamwork, the Vanguard marvels at how quickly the young hero has reached level 63 in just a week before standing before the massive gate to the 80th floor. Commander Icilian inquires whether they can be escorted safely to the 81st floor, fully aware that formidable dragon-type monsters spawn beyond this point, while his companions boast of the hero's immense potential. Expressing their gratitude, the party steps forward into the glow of the transfer stone to brave the escalating dangers ahead. Emerging onto the 81st floor, they are immediately confronted by a colossal level 81 silver dragon roaring violently across the cavern. Maintaining their momentum, the frontline fighters rally to keep up the relentless assault against swarming gargoyles and aerial threats. Protecting Princess Noelle from incoming strikes, Icilian watches closely as the young hero leaps past the defensive line into the heart of the fray. Executing a high-speed illusion, the hero manifests a shadow clone to split the enemy's focus and create an opening. Seizing the brief window created by the distraction, he lunges forward to deliver a crushing blow directly into the silver dragon's flank. The beast reeling, the rest of the vanguard unleashes an overwhelming combined barrage to shatter the remaining monsters. Reflecting on the fierce encounter, the veterans praise the hero's extraordinary growth to level 74, agreeing that he is ready to join the battle directly starting the next day. Far away from the dungeon's horrors, Takashi sits comfortably in a quiet room with Arya, discussing his decision to escort her back to the town of Lermal. Calculated resolve glints in his eyes as he considers how opting for a slow 20-day round trip by carriage grants him invaluable extra time in this world. Looking out toward the estate grounds, Takashi weighs the formal arrangements, knowing he declined instantaneous magic transfer to artificially stretch out his timeline. The gentle smile, Arya approves of the 12-day window of freedom, which will allow them to delve deep into the Divine Treat dungeon up to the 110th floor before any obligation forces his return. He began to reveal the truth about his origins, causing Arya to repeat the name of his home world in quiet disbelief. Asking her to remain calm, he confirmed that everything he was about to say was the absolute truth. He admitted that he had originally come from a completely different realm, offering a sincere apology for keeping it secret from her for so long. To his complete surprise, she simply smiled and wondered aloud if she might be able to visit Earth with him. Driven by curiosity, he suggested testing the idea immediately to see if the transfer magic would carry them both. Shared anticipation, they reached out and clasped hands to maintain physical contact during the attempt. As the familiar system prompt manifested in the air, he prepared to initiate the crossing back to his home world. An instantaneous flash, he vanished from the bedchamber, leaving her standing alone in utter shock. Realizing the transfer had failed to carry her along, he instantly warped back into the room, urgently calling out her name. Overwhelmed with sudden terror, she threw her arms around him and wept, terrified that he had disappeared forever. Examining the inorganic equipment that had successfully crossed over, he deduced that living beings other than himself could not be brought along. Gently comforting her tearful distress, he offered a quiet promise that he would eventually find a way to show her his home world. Meanwhile, high within the West Tower, the Elven commander and Princess Noelle entrusted Ereshkigal with a vital task regarding the Divine Tree. Demonstrating her precise spatial abilities, the hooded warrior prepared to teleport directly toward her intended companion. Uniting with him, she urged that they transfer directly near the Divine Tree chamber to bypass the patrolling spirit guards. She agreed without hesitation, preparing to move forward, but the elven maiden called out sharply for them to wait. Shocked by what had transpired, the elven princess accused her of opening a direct pathway into Takashi's soul, horrified that a candidate destined to lead the heroic party might be corrupted by dark forces. The hooded woman calmly confirmed that they had bound their connection through a kiss. Prompted to check his current status, Takashi brought up his interface screen, revealing his level had risen dramatically to 75 with boosted attributes. His companion explained that while official titles had not been granted yet, the prerequisites were already taking form. Takashi inquired about the true nature of Ellen's blessing. She flusteredly explained that she had merely transferred a pathway through their lips rather than directly granting divine titles or protections. Realizing the truth in his words, the group concluded that he was speaking honestly, agreeing that it was time to proceed directly toward the sacred tree chamber. Reaching a grand teleportation circle within the ancient ruins, the hooded woman declared she would remain behind in the outer hall, while Takashi stepped forward. With a solemn nod, Takashi and his guide stepped onto the glowing sanctuary platform, preparing to enter the sacred inner domain. Beyond the portal lay a vast, breathtaking expanse of floating land masses suspended in an infinite ethereal cavern beneath the heart of the sacred tree. As Takashi looked across the floating islands, a dark, suffocating energy began to swirl around him, awakening suppressed resentment within his heart. Shadowy manifestation whispered venomously into his mind, reminding him of how others had discarded him as a low-rank weakling and urging him to despise those who looked down on his true potential. Vivid memories of betrayal and cold contempt flooded Takashi's consciousness as the shadow fed upon his growing anger. A malevolent entity urged him to slaughter all who had mocked him, promising that he could steal their abilities and rise above them all. Before the creeping darkness could claim him completely, Ereshkigal lunged forward, shouting firmly for Takashi not to let himself be swallowed by the malice. Shaken by her voice, Takashi blinked in confusion, resisting the evil whispers attempting to warp his mind. Holding Takashi close, Ereshkigal told him to push ahead while she confronted the sinister spirit attempting to corrupt his soul. Sending into a beam of radiant light above the shattered floating land masses, she reminded him that the priestess of light was calling for him. As he gently descended toward the glowing magical crest below, he offered his heartfelt gratitude to Helen just as a familiar, desperate voice called out his name. The tender and bittersweet smile, she raised her hand to wave a fond farewell as she parted from his sight. Tears welled in the young elven princess's eyes as she called out to him again, her voice filled with deep relief and concern. Realizing that her words had guided him back, he lay cradled in Noel's arms upon the glowing seal as their path forward finally. Recovering from his collapse, Takashi inquired about what had transpired during the ceremony and whether any divine words from the creation goddess Ashura had been received. Noel gently explained that he had fallen unconscious midway through the ritual, leaving the divine message unbestowed. He then recounted the vivid vision that had flashed before his eyes, a winged statue standing within a floating garden amidst a world consumed by fiery destruction. Considering his description, Noel noted that the floating garden could very well be the sanctuary of the creation goddess Ashura, located on the 110th floor of the sacred tree, prompting Takashi to wonder if he had truly glimpsed her realm. She further elaborated that, according to lore, her sanctuary was indeed a floating garden adorned with radiant flowers, suggesting the winged statue Takashi witnessed might have been goddess Ashura herself. The shadow of concern crossing her features, Noel confessed that the divine words of goddess Ashura had ceased reaching her recently, suspecting that some unforeseen trouble might have befallen the deity. She pondered 500 years of history, explaining how the demon lord Ereshkigal had once scorched the land in crimson flames, and speculating whether the revived demon lord was now attempting to seal away the goddess's power. Takashi, however, felt a deep contradiction, reasoning that if Ellen were indeed Ereshkigal, it made no sense for her to have saved him when he was nearly consumed by that dark presence. Noel pointed out that the figure from the past was unequivocally the demon lord Ereshkigal, though it remained possible she had temporarily forgotten her own true identity. She added that without earning the title of hero by receiving the goddess's divine words, the gate leading to the 110th floor would remain firmly shut. Faced with this roadblock, Takashi decided they should focus on climbing the sacred tree to reach the 109th floor first, leaving the rest to be resolved once they arrived. Noel offered a gentle, accepting smile, agreeing with his pragmatic plan forward, as Takashi prepared to depart. Thanking Noel for escorting them toward the western tower, a lingering doubt crossed his mind regarding Ellen's true nature during the spirit absorption moment. He vividly recalled the intense visual of Ellen manifesting horn-like features in a dramatic, otherworldly gaze during that chaotic encounter. Reflecting silently on those memories, Takashi harbored a subtle intuition that there was more to her identity than met the eye. Noticing how visibly shaken Noel had become when the name of the demon Lord Ereshkigal was spoken earlier, Takashi pondered whether it might be best to avoid uttering that name in front of her again. Apologizing softly for the disturbance, Noel requested that they refrain from mentioning the demon Lord's name in front of the Priestess of Light, while Takashi silently wondered how Ellen appeared in the eyes of the young priestess. Listened quietly as Princess Noel expressed her deep regrets over his upcoming departure, apologizing for asking so much of him. She then reached into her robes to present him with a special parting gift before he set off on his journey. Offering a delicate, glowing pendant, she asked him to hold on to it as a protective charm and to remember her by it, prompting a warm smile of gratitude from the young hero. Their farewells complete, the royal carriage rolled past the line guards and departed the grandiose castle gates. As they rode along, he politely inquired if they could make a brief stop near the main gates before leaving the district entirely. Upon arriving at the Dora Merchant Guild, the guildmaster greeted them warmly and handed over 2 million gold as payment for their escort duty. The merchant also converted all their collected magic stones and dungeon drop items into cash, adding a staggering 22 million gold alongside the official proof of Ukuel's subjugation. Stepping back out onto the street, he felt a sting of guilt for having doubted the guildmaster, who had discreetly handled Ukuel's defeat as a mere bandit attack to avoid unnecessary political uproar. Realizing they had suddenly become exceptionally wealthy, he enthusiastically proposed an immediate shopping spree at a nearby armory called the Steel Maiden. The pair stepped inside the spacious shop, surrounded by rows of finely crafted weapons, armor, and magical equipment. He urged Arya to pick out whatever new daggers or gear she preferred for their climb up the sacred tree, leaving her briefly flustered before he turned around to search for a shopkeeper. Approaching a young man who was examining the merchandise, he asked for assistance, only for the youth to politely clarify that he was a fellow customer rather than a clerk. Friendly customer introduced himself as Chris and offered to help them shop anyway, leading to pleasant introductions all around. Thanks to the excursion, Arya fully outfitted herself in a high-tier set, including a longbow of destruction, mithril armor, a ring of the moon, and the goddess's droplet. As they departed, he pondered whether Chris might actually be an elf hiding his ears under his knit cap, while Arya wondered about the mysterious young man's background. He turned toward his companion after noticing her sudden silence, calling out her name as she stared blankly ahead as if trying to grasp a fading memory. Arya apologized, admitting she could barely recall what Chris had been wearing or what he even looked like, as if his presence had left almost no impression on her mind. Leaving the commercial district behind, horse-drawn carriages rattled through the grand city gates along the bustling thoroughfare. Inside a shared carriage, Takashi suggested disembarking at the upcoming stop to avoid drawing unwanted attention, and Arya readily agreed. The coach came to a halt beside a quiet roadside outpost, allowing them to step down into the open fields. Once clear of the carriage, Takashi quietly asked Helen if she could teleport them to Ellen's whereabouts, but she warned him that moving instantly was impossible while they were under active surveillance. He wondered aloud if their observer was a spirit similar to the palace guardians, prompting Arya to speculate whether it might instead be an elf or a demon, before Takashi activated his perception ability to pinpoint the watcher. Locking onto the distant shadow, he caught sight of the figure lurking near the tree line and suspected it was a spy sent by the Earl. Though Takashi sensed no immediate murderous intent from the hidden watcher, he found a constant tailing far too persistent to ignore. Taking action, he unslung his newly acquired longbow, drawing the string back with practiced skill and firing a swift warning shot directly toward the silhouette. To their utter shock, the arrow was effortlessly caught between two fingers by Chris, who stood revealed without his beanie, exposing long, pointed elven ears. Takashi demanded to know why he had followed them. Chris playfully brushed it off as mere curiosity, expressed surprise that Takashi had managed to remember him at all. Chris explained that his poncho was enchanted with a unique blessing designed to erase his presence from human consciousness, leaving him baffled as to how Takashi could still recall his face and perceive his stealth magic. Staring at the enigmatic elf standing before them, Takashi confronted him directly, demanding to know his true identity. The casual farewell, Chris noted that since his cover was blown, he would take his leave, vanishing into thin air in an instant and leaving Takashi and Arya staring at the empty space in astonishment. Stood quietly alongside Arya as Helen, clad in her dark battle gear, asked if Arya remembered her. Arya looked back in mild recognition, recalling her identity as Eren. Helen offered a quiet apology for her past actions, asking Arya to look after Takashi and get along with him during their upcoming conquest of the sacred tree. Seeing that Takashi had made his decision, Arya relented, realizing she had no choice but to accept Helen into their group. Their agreement forged, Arya suggested taking Helen along to defeat the wild giant army near Lamille. Inspecting a magical pendant received from Princess Noelle, Takashi reconsidered discarding it, realizing that throwing away a gift from the queen might not be wise. He examined the item further, realizing it was a tracking device meant to signal his location unless stored inside his magical inventory. Next to it lay gargoyle summoning statues, leaving him intrigued. Helen explained that the item could summon a level 80 gargoyle as an ally for 10 minutes, revealing they had reached level 75 after reaching the 81st floor. Deciding it was time to move, the trio prepared to head out from their temporary quarters. Kashi thanked Helen for her assistance, proposing that they scale the sacred tree again tonight, while quietly asking Arya to keep Helen's true non-human identity a secret from others. Though Arya worried slightly about Mateo, Takashi assured her that he would be perfectly fine. Arya smiled warmly, agreeing to follow his lead since she trusted he had a good reason for his actions. He thanked her, adding that he would explain everything to Mateo personally when the time was right. Turning to the tavern, they were greeted boisterously by Mateo, who welcomed them back just in time for lunch while calling for food to be prepared. Inside, Terana, dressed in a cute maid uniform, greeted Takashi and Arya enthusiastically upon their return. Mateo proudly introduced Terana as the tavern's new poster girl replacing the light priestess, prompting Arya to quietly view her as yet another. Walking through the bustling town square alongside Takashi, Terana expressed her profound gratitude for being rescued from her imprisonment. Though Takashi humbly insisted that he had done nothing worthy of such praise, the young beast girl bowed deeply, thanking him for giving her hope once more. The peaceful walk was abruptly interrupted when two rough, armored thugs blocked their path. Spotting Terana's prominent cat ears, the men began to mock and harass her with coarse jests. Before she could retreat, one of the ruffians coarsely reached out, grabbing her by her delicate feline ears and forcing her head down as she cried out in pain. Without a moment's hesitation, Takashi intervened, delivering a lightning-fast, high kick directly into the aggressor's jaw. He launched the assailant backward into his companion. Violent impact smashed both thugs hard against the nearby stone building, knocking them instantly unconscious. Takashi casually adjusted his coat, having handled the threat in the blink of an eye. As they resumed their journey, Terana looked up at him with deep admiration, softly sharing her dream of one day returning to the vast golden plains with her beastkin brethren. Sometime later, Takashi awoke sitting on the edge of a quiet bed, realizing he had briefly drifted off to sleep while contemplating his duties back on Earth. Joining his party, Arya, Noemi, and Helen, they prepared to venture deep into the dungeon. Takashi outlined their immediate plan to dedicate the first 2 hours to boosting Arya's level. Arya turned to Helen with a warm smile, reassuring her that every member of their group was valued and that they were all bound for the same distant goal together. Though Helen secretly doubted whether she truly belonged, Takashi stepped forward and firmly declared that she, Arya, Noemi, and himself were an unbreakable team striving for the 110th floor. Overwhelmed by his sincere acceptance, Helen's stern demeanor softened, a faint, tender smile gracing her face. Their spirits united, the party surged forward into the dark corridors of the lower floors, setting up a massive target for Arya to strike the finishing blow. Executing a brilliant strike, Arya slashed down a formidable dragon baby monster. The colossal surge of experience points caused her level to instantly skyrocket straight to level 50. As Arya celebrated her rapid growth, Noemi and Helen deliberated on whether to move to the dangerous 80th floor next to advance Takashi's strength even further. Before they could decide, a terrifying level 80 wraith burst forth from the gloom, wielding a massive scythe. Yet the companions stood ready, bolstered by Helen's divine protection. He immediately invoked his shadow clone technique, multiplying his presence to overwhelm the undead beast while receiving empowering spirit magic from his companions. Accessing his magical inventory, the young warrior summoned a stony gargoyle to join the vanguard of his attack force. Together, the summoned gargoyle and his shadow replicas tore into the massive skeletal wraith with ferocious coordination. The wraith destroyed, a staggering bounty of over 5 trillion experience points flooded in alongside rare rank A materials, instantly elevating Takashi to level 76. When Arya marveled at his rapid growth, he casually offered to pull on the next target. A display of ruthless efficiency, Takashi and his summoned force swept through wave after wave of high-level dungeon horrors. Colossal experience yield pushed Takashi up to level 77, while Arya absorbed enough shared power to leap all the way to level 54. Catching his breath after the battle, Takashi warmly praised Arya for her endurance and expressed deep gratitude to Helen and Noemi for their vital support. Curious about his enigmatic ally, Takashi inquired where Helen usually spent her time when not delving into dungeons, though she deflected his question with a quiet, enigmatic response. Realizing it was better not to pry into her personal affairs, he bade the hooded woman and Noemi a pleasant good night as they parted ways. Initiating his dimension transfer, Takashi returned seamlessly to the quiet suburban street outside his modern home. Standing alone in his bedroom, he retrieved his smartphone and checked the incoming messages on his screen. The message was from Shirori Sakiya, who noted it had been 5 days since they last spoke and asked if he was free tomorrow, explaining that Hiroto Sato was inviting him on another dungeon dive. Takashi promptly agreed to join them. Following morning at 9, Takashi rode his motorized scooter toward the Tamachi First Dungeon while communicating with Shirori, who voiced concern that Sato might harbor ill intentions and asked if Takashi was truly comfortable diving with him again. Cruising along the road, Takashi acknowledged that Sato might indeed be plotting a scheme out of spite, but remained completely unbothered, knowing his level 77 strength placed him far beyond any danger. Arriving at the entrance of the Tamachi First Dungeon on his scooter, Takashi was immediately greeted by Shirori, who stood waiting alongside Sato. He arrived to find Sakiya in a sleek white costume, greeting him cheerfully alongside another party member named Tomita, an F-rank adventurer with short, spiky bleached hair. Tomita noted how attractive Sakiya was, asking if they had met before, while Sato introduced Tomita as his cousin, eyeing the newcomer with sharp curiosity. Standing opposite each other, the young traveler in casual clothes faced Sato, who smirked in full armored gear, clearly plotting something sinister. Sly grins spread across Sato's face as he anticipated whatever trap he was setting. Due to its vast size, the dungeon raid was split into 2 distinct teams, with Sato leading Team 1 and Sakiya positioned alongside Takashi in Team 2. Sakiya quietly admitted how relieved she felt having him present, hinting that Sato had recently approached her about something troubling, before the alarm raised for approaching monsters. A horde of savage C-rank kobolds snarled aggressively, wielding crude wooden clubs as they rushed forward to attack. Vanguard fighters raised their heavy shields to brace against the sudden assault, shouting for everyone to stay focused and hold the line. Steel clashed with beast-hide as frontline warriors swiftly cut down the charging kobolds, clearing a bloody path through the entrance chamber. As the party pushed deeper into the vast stone corridors, Sakiya wondered aloud why Sato had chosen this specific dungeon if it was his first time here as well, suspecting she might be the reason. Looking down nervously, she confessed that Sato had recently asked her out. Out in the open, Sato boldly confessed his feelings to Shirori, pleading with her to go out with him, leaving her thoroughly startled. Shirori offered a gentle rejection, explaining that it was not the right time, but Sato passionately insisted he would clear a major dungeon to prove his worth. Kashi questioned why she turned him down, noting Sato's fine appearance. But Shirori quietly admitted she couldn't bring herself to care for someone who wasn't kind to others. Suddenly, the cavern structure around them cracked violently as debris rained down, catching the party off guard. As the dust settled, the adventurers shouted in alarm, trying to figure out what was happening. The leaders analyzed the surrounding magical barrier, realizing that someone had deliberately trapped them using advanced earth magic. Stern warning echoed through the hall, urging everyone to prepare for combat as a massive wave of kobolds was expected to pour into the chamber. Kashi reviewed their situation, knowing C-rank kobolds were manageable for their level, but advised the party to split up and search the chamber without getting isolated. While Takashi was instructed to stay on standby, Shirori stepped forward to offer her assistance, expressing her sympathy for his situation. An ominous rumble shook the ground, signaling that something far more dangerous than ordinary kobolds was approaching. For them loomed a colossal B-rank monster, the Kobold King, wielding a massive sword and towering over the party. Vanguard launched a fierce attack against the giant beast, but its overwhelming strength pushed them back into a desperate struggle. Evaluating his equipped items and abilities, Takashi formulated a plan, instructing his companions to draw the monster's attention while he executed a shadow technique. Executing a swift sequence of movements, Takashi closed the distance and landed a precise blow on the beast. Venom from Takashi's dagger took hold, afflicting the Kobold King and causing it to falter, giving the party their opening to strike. Deactivated his stealth technique, allowing his dark shadow double to fade back into his own body as the massive Kobold King finally collapsed motionless onto the cavern floor. Exclamations of triumph echoed through the chamber as the adventurers celebrated their hard-fought victory, while Takashi quietly felt relieved that his support had enabled everyone to survive. Yet the grim reality of their ordeal hung heavy over the survivors. The sudden appearance of the beast had cost lives that even sacred recovery magic could not restore. Before anyone could process their grief, a glowing barrier suddenly materialized across the passageway, completely sealing off their only avenue of escape. Amidst the confusion, Sato and Takada stepped into view from beyond the barrier, offering a cruel, mocking smile as they observed how many had managed to survive. Sato approached Shirori with a bizarrely casual demeanor, expressing joy at her survival, while she innocently asked if he had come to rescue them. His demeanor abruptly shifted as he gripped Shiori's arm with agonizing force, dismissing the indignant shouts of her companions who demanded to know what he was doing. As the party demanded a clear explanation, Takada raised a blood-stained blade with a sinister smile, offering a mockingly casual response. Without a moment's hesitation, Takada struck out in a swift, lethal motion, cleanly decapitating one of the helpless party members in a cold-blooded display. Shiori's horrific scream shattered the silence, while Takashi immediately recognized the sheer power behind the strike and shouted for everyone to brace for battle. Surviving party members raised their shields and weapons defensively, confronting the traitors with furious questions about their intentions. Takada let out a maniacal grin, gloating that the fight would be far more entertaining if his victims put up a desperate struggle. Sato babbled incoherently in a state of growing madness, attempting to excuse his traitorous actions while Shirori recoiled in terror, demanding that he release her. Takada chillingly announced his intention to slaughter everyone except Shirori, sparking a panic in Sato as Shirori desperately warned the killer not to draw any closer. Driven to absolute fury by the betrayal, Takashi launched himself forward with a fierce battle cry, determined to cut down the attackers where they stood. He writhed on the floor, clutching his scorched and blindingly painful eyes as his attacker laughed maniacally at his agony. Shirori rushed over to cast healing magic on his face, but before she could finish, a brutal blow struck her down, sending her crashing into the stone rubble. Grabbing her by the hair, the traitor threatened to slit her throat unless his ally fulfilled their deal and carried her away immediately. Realizing that staying meant total annihilation for his party and the elimination of their only healer, he made a desperate decision to trigger his world transfer ability. In an instant, he materialized back in the safety of a quiet room, away from the immediate slaughter of the dungeon. Working rapidly, he opened his spatial inventory and equipped a dark hooded cloak, a cloth mask, and powerful artifact gear, activating stealth before initiating another interworld transfer back to the battlefield. Reappeared silently in the cavern behind the unsuspecting traitors, who were busy taunting the fallen party members about their martial arts background. Shirori looked on in horror as the villain sneered arrogantly, mocking her companion's lower-rank status. The ruthless assailant gloated openly, revealing that his true capability rivaled A-rank adventurers, questioning how long the remaining C-ranks could possibly endure. Brandishing a pair of sharp daggers, he sadistically promised to prolong their torture, carving them apart piece by piece. Before the murderer could react, a swift, powerful kick struck his arm, deflecting his blade in a sudden burst of movement. The villain's eyes widened in sheer shock as a masked figure suddenly appeared right before his face. Steel clashed against steel as the masked hero engaged the traitor in rapid, violent close-quarters combat. Staggering backward, the stunned attacker questioned how anyone could possibly detect and strike him while his stealth was active. The sharp flash of magic, the concealment spell, was formally dispelled. He stood cloaked before the astonished party, his presence dripping with palpable malice. Surprised by his sudden appearance, the traitors immediately recognized the high-tier cloak he wore, deducing he possessed a rare stealth ability, though his overwhelming murderous intent made it impossible to stay completely hidden. Puzzled by the absence of their supposed low-rank target, Sato eyed the mysterious masked figure suspiciously, questioning if this intruder was the one who had taken the valuable cargo. Without offering a single word of explanation, he struck forward with devastating speed, landing a crushing blow directly into the traitor's face. Instantly following up his assault, he executed a shadow clone technique, splitting his form into multiple dark duplicates that lunged in unison with drawn daggers. Before his enemy could react to the illusionary copies, earth elemental magic burst violently from the cavern floor, shattering stone and blasting the attacker into the air. Nimbly touching down amidst the falling debris, the masked warrior looked down upon his writhing target. Horrified by the sheer display of force, the defeated adversary realized in terror that such power could never belong to an F rank, only to be sternly warned to remain motionless after having his legs. Sato arrogantly stood over Takashi, demanding to know if he had leveled up his abilities through concealment and asking how many people he had murdered so far. Reeling from the confrontation, Takashi refused to be lumped together with Sato, while a teammate called out to Ibaraki in concern. Another ally praised Takashi's efforts while warning the intruder that the Equilibrium Adjustment Bureau would not turn a blind eye to his crimes. Sato sneered condescendingly, boasting about his superior power and mocking the idea of an S-rank responder coming to save them. In a sudden flash, Sato struck down his opponent with cold indifference, noticing the nearby healer and expressing sadistic anticipation for torture. Shirori knelt beside Takashi to treat his terrible wounds, applying her magic despite the high mana cost. As a glowing magical circle activated under her hands, Takashi's wounds began to mend rapidly. Reshkagul recognized the voice of Nakamura and realized Sato was top-tier trash, instructing Shirori to hand over potion bottles to force-feed the downed allies so they could escape. Standing firm with his blades drawn, Takashi regenerated his severed leg entirely, realizing he couldn't hold back his high A-rank capabilities any longer. Sato reacted with shock and fury at Takashi's sudden recovery, declaring that he would no longer pull his punches. A barrage of razor-sharp ice shards erupted across the room, raining down viciously upon Takashi and his allies. Responding swiftly to the magic attack, Takashi summoned a towering level 81 gargoyle statue to block the deadly projectiles. Taking advantage of the monster's defense, Takashi urged his allies to fall back and escape while he held off Sato alone. With ruthless killer intent gleaming in his eyes, Sato charged forward with metallic claws bared. Sharp blades of Sato's weapon gleamed coldly as he swung down to strike. He lunged forward with lethal intent, his deadly blades sweeping through the air directly toward Sakia's defenseless form. Before the fatal strike could land, the massive stone gargoyle interjected itself, sweeping Sakia out of harm's way just in time. A sudden blur of motion, a strange spatial shift occurred, instantly swapping positions before anyone could react. The attacker boasted smugly, gloating about his unique positional swap skill that allowed him to instantly trade places with target allies or foes. Kashi immediately analyzed the situation, realizing his enemy had used a C-rank ally as a targeted decoy right before the gargoyle strike landed. Recognizing the danger to his comrade, Takashi ordered the gargoyle to halt its assault instantly. The assailant taunted them sinisterly, revealing why no one had ever lived to report his secret ability. The psychotic grin, he declared that everyone who witnesses his spatial skill is marked for immediate execution. Kashi prepared himself for the incoming attack, bracing as his adversary charged at full speed. Thoughts raced through Takashi's mind as he realized the cruel tactical setup was intended to force him into total despair. The attacker sneered maniacally, delighting in the terror and confusion he was inflicting upon his prey. Closing the distance in an instant, the opponent drove his lethal blade forward with full momentum. Knowing the blade aimed directly for his heart, Takashi resolved to intentionally take the blow to secure an opening. Sharp knife plunged deeply into Takashi's torso, blood spraying across the battlefield as he absorbed the strike head-on. Horrified onlookers gasped in shock as blood poured from Takashi's wound, even as he calculated whether his vital organs had escaped fatal damage. He could only watch in quiet fury as Sato gloated over his victim, forcefully grabbing her and demanding that she uncover her face to show more agony. Realizing the sheer malice driving his foe, a man who abused such terrifying power solely for his own sick pleasure, he swore that such a monster could never be forgiven. As his arrogant opponent celebrated what he assumed was an absolute victory, a split-second opening presented itself, allowing him to quietly activate his shadow clone technique. In an instant, 30 identical clones materialized out of thin air, completely surrounding the bewildered attacker. The violent battle finally brought to an end. Quiet settled over the ruined stone chamber as the young healer called out to him. Checking on the fallen combatant, they confirmed his demise, triggering a glowing system notification that offered him the chance to plunder the traitor's skills. Beside them, the young woman embraced her savior in tears, overwhelmed with relief and gratitude that they had both survived the ordeal. Rising to his feet, the seasoned investigator stated that they needed to exit the area swiftly and report the incident to the governing authorities. They weighed their choices regarding how to report the deaths, recognizing that carrying the bodies out would spark an inconvenient investigation. Addressing the young warrior, the investigator reassured him that hiding his true strength was understandable and clearly not done out of malice. Made it clear that he had no intention of causing trouble for someone who had risked everything to protect the party. Proceeding toward the glowing exit gate, the group confirmed among themselves that they would keep the full details of the encounter confidential. Glancing back with a bright smile, she reminded him that despite everything that transpired, they had all fought together as comrades. Stepping through the swirling portal, the party safely emerged outside the entrance of the 10th dungeon. Examining his personal display window, he reviewed the available skill plunders, assassination, acceleration, and position swap before finalizing his choice. Selected the most troublesome ability from the list, successfully acquiring the substitution skill to add to his growing list of personal stats. Shortly after, Shirori informed the group, while sipping canned coffee, that the Equilibrium Division would be arriving soon, acknowledging that Takashi had also been the one who saved Kuroda's team. He offered a quiet apology for not being able to say much about what had occurred deeper within the dungeon. She reassured him with a warm smile, promising to keep his secrets, including the mysterious potion, safe, and expressing her heartfelt gratitude once again. Moments later, as they waited in the parking lot, the group noticed an approaching vehicle signaling the arrival of their contacts. Sleek, dark luxury limousine pulled up before them, prompting a reaction of shock as the driver was recognized as Jean. Rear door swung open, and an elegant leg stepped out onto the pavement as the team watched intently. Stepping out from the car was none other than Ryoko Saibara, one of the legendary S-rank individuals. Group stared in disbelief, wondering why a legendary figure, one of only 3 in the entire country, would appear in a place like that. An elite cadre from the top-tier atmospheric air clan made their grand appearance, radiating the unmistakable presence of high-ranking S-class hunters. Observing their arrival, Takashi and his companions quietly questioned why such prominent figures from an elite international organization would personally intervene, given the extreme rarity of S-rank operatives in the country. Stepping forward, the commander of the S-rank squad directly questioned whether Takashi's modest group was responsible for defeating Hinoyama, prompting a hasty clarification that another warrior had delivered the final blow. As investigator Yomogi began to elaborate on Hinoyama's past actions and combat methods, he was quickly interrupted, urged not to dredge up painful memories unnecessarily. Leading the elite guests toward the local dungeon entrance, the team moved to conduct an on-site inspection of the exact area where the battle had ended. Inside the ruined chamber, the female commander carefully examined the catastrophic destruction, noting with growing suspicion that despite the devastating force required to obliterate a high-level hunter, no residual magic energy remained in the air. While Sato internally worried that his wide-area attack might have given away too much, the sharp-eyed commander turned her gaze back toward the party and openly accused someone among them of concealing their true status. Pointing her finger straight at Takashi, she declared with absolute conviction that she could sense an extraordinary, unhidden aura emanating directly from him. Fixing him with a sharp, piercing stare, she asserted that there was no way he was merely a low-tier F-rank hunter. Investigator Yomogi immediately stepped in to defend the official records, confirming that Takashi had undergone a rigorous re-examination 10 days prior and had been officially registered as F-rank. Accepting the official stance for the moment, the investigative team proceeded to gather DNA samples and physical evidence from the battle site for independent verification. The field investigation wrapped up for the evening, Yomogi instructed everyone to report to the Equilibrium Adjustment Division the following morning at 10 o'clock. As Takashi and his friends departed, the commander watched them go with a subtle, knowing smirk that signaled her skepticism was far from resolved. Later that night, the group clinked their ice-cold mugs together in a hearty toast, eager to wash away the tension of the day's interrogation. Seated at a cozy tavern table, Takashi enthusiastically downed glass after glass of beer, while his companions looked on in good-natured amusement. He stirred gradually as the faint chirping of birds drifted through the quiet room, signaling the start of a new morning. Sitting up groggily on the bed, he looked around the unfamiliar bedroom, trying to piece together where he was. Sudden nausea struck him hard, sending him scrambling frantically toward the bathroom, while Sakia offered gentle reassurance that she would clean up any mess. Turning to the room, he froze completely upon opening the door, confronted by the shocking sight of Sakia standing entirely unclad right before him as she offered a cheerful morning greeting. Overwhelmed by embarrassment, he immediately slammed the door shut and profusely apologized, while she lightly noted that this was already the second time he had caught her changing. Once dressed, she joined him to chat, playfully revealing how he had rambled passionately about fantasy novels, demon lords, and braves after drinking 2 mugs of alcohol the previous night. Leaning in closer, she gently expressed her genuine curiosity about the fantasy novel he loved so much and asked if he would share the story with her sometime. Her gaze softened as she admitted wanting to learn more about the things he cared about, bringing her face tantalizingly close to his in an intimate moment. Her breath mingled in the narrow space between them as the distance vanished completely, interrupting the quiet, tender moment. A sharp notification tone echoed from a nearby phone, prompting Sakia to check her messages and announce that Yomogi requested their presence at 10 in the morning. After riding her scooter back to his apartment so he could change into fresh clothes, they departed together toward the Equilibrium Adjustment Division. They arrived at the official headquarters building, prepared to recount the detailed events that had transpired at the Tamachi 10th dungeon. Inside the interrogation room, the young rankers sat side by side across the table from investigator Yomogi and his sharp-eyed female colleague. Female investigator carefully documented their testimony before directing Takashi to undergo a comprehensive physical examination to verify his condition. Turning his attention back to the pressing matter, Yomogi pressed Takashi to reveal whether Sato had disclosed any further information after their encounter. Listen carefully as Yomogi explained that due to confidentiality, details could only be shared under specific conditions. Yomogi then leaned in and formally invited him to work for the Equilibrium Adjustment Division. Surprised by the sudden offer, the young man pointed out his low F-rank status, but Yomogi brushed off the official rating with a chuckle. Yomogi explained that despite the formal F-rank examination results, The formidable aura surrounding him made such excuses entirely invalid. Realizing the truth, he internally acknowledged that both Yomogi and Shiho must have witnessed him defeating the A-rank Hinoyama, exposing his true strength. Investigators elaborated further, warning that the recent incident had drawn the dangerous attention of S-rank powerhouses toward him, making protection necessary. They referenced the legendary S-rank figures in Japan, Ryoko Saihara and Keisuke Denaida, whose extraordinary skills and stat totals exceeding 100 made them threats even greater than high-tier monsters. Continuing their detailed briefing, the agents outlined how these top-rank individuals operated within powerful clans that held immense sway, creating a precarious balance of power that required official oversight. Puzzled by how all this connected to him, he pondered the relationship between defeating Hinoyama, replacing fallen agents, and joining the Equilibrium Adjustment Division. Mogi laid out the crucial, unwritten rule. Joining their division would grant him immunity, preventing even elite S-rank figures like Ryoko Saihara from acting against him directly. Sweeten the deal, Yomogi offered guaranteed special treatment, including full coverage of tuition and living expenses until graduation, complete exemption from quotas, and total freedom in his duties. Faced with such an exceptionally attractive proposition, he asked for time to carefully consider his decision before giving a final response. Accepting his request, the division head politely concluded the meeting, expressing hope for a favorable answer as he departed the office building. Later, at a casual diner, Sakiya met with him over lunch, listening intently as he brought up an important favor he needed to ask her. Recalling how he used to enter dungeons weekly, he invited her to join him for future dungeon dives, a proposition that brought a bright, delighted smile to her face. She reacted with utter astonishment when he asked her to team up for a dungeon run, initially mistaking his invitation for a group date, before he clarified that he needed someone trustworthy like her to apply for dungeon access. He went on to explain that he would ask a few trustworthy contacts she recommended, though he emphasized that she was the person he trusted most. Cheeks flushed with a soft blush as his sincere words struck a chord deep within her. Meanwhile, Takashi pondered the logistical problem of defeat drops on Earth, where monsters only yielded low-grade magic stones, unless proper precautions were taken to avoid drawing unwanted attention from S-rank clans or government divisions. Back in the cafe, Sakiya happily agreed to keep their plans an absolute secret between just the two of them. As Takashi walked home along the quiet residential street, he checked his inventory, considering how much the Gargoyle Lord magic stones he had gathered in the other world might fetch on Earth. Looking up current market values on his phone, he was stunned to discover that a single A-rank magic stone sold for 16 million yen, meaning selling all 7 would net him over 100 million yen, enough to easily buy a house. Determined to equip Sakiya properly with high-grade gear before attempting an A-rank dungeon, he hopped onto his scooter, resolved to take immediate action. Arriving at a high-end equipment shop, Takashi began browsing the displays, only to be recognized by familiar, unwelcoming figures. 2 former middle school acquaintances, now D-rank hunters, approached him with condescending smirks, mocking an F-rank like him for playing adventurer in a store far beyond his reach. And one of them aggressively grabbed Takashi's shoulder to force his authority. Takashi's eyes flared with overwhelming aura and pressure, commanding them never to touch him again. Paralyzed by sheer horror and intense killing intent, both bullies wept uncontrollably, completely broken by his overwhelming presence. Satisfied as the terrified pair collapsed in fear, Takashi turned away with cool satisfaction, while the shop clerk watched on in awe. Clerk politely greeted Takashi and Kurabayashi, pointing out that while this area was intended for B-rank gear and below, Takashi seemed capable of far more. She then offered to unlock the restricted vault, leading Takashi directly to the exclusive showroom reserved strictly for A-rank equipment and above. Stepped into an entirely bare room with the clerk, puzzled to find nothing on display, only to be guided forward into the center of the high-security space. She operated a touchscreen console mounted on the wall, explaining that the high-tier equipment was protected under strict security protocols and would be retrieved directly from the vault based on their digital selection. Browsing through the interactive display, Takashi scrolled through an expansive catalog featuring blades, battle axes, and advanced high-spec weaponry. He was astonished by the sophisticated gear available, marveling at how even firearm-style weapons were crafted with high-spec magic specs, far exceeding standard dwarf-forged arms. As Takashi expressed his amazement, the clerk pressed the confirmation button on the interface and offered to let him test out one of the special pieces. The monitor displayed a heavy, specialized firearm, a magic railgun designed to utilize mana stabilization for high-velocity projectile launches within dungeons. Holding the futuristic weapon casing, he noted that it was surprisingly light, only for the clerk to casually mention its astounding price tag of 400 million yen. A sleek metallic container sat firmly on the display stand, holding the extraordinarily expensive weapon. His jaw dropped in utter disbelief at the astronomical sum, stumbling backward as the attendant calmly inquired if he still wished to try it out. The authoritative gentleman stepped forward, clarifying that while live testing was forbidden inside the facility, an upcoming official survey mission to the MT Fuji First Dungeon would allow Takashi to borrow and field test the railgun on site. The proposal left him completely speechless as he realized he was being asked to join a high-stakes expedition into one of the country's most dangerous dungeons. Standing in the office, the official suggested that Takashi participate in the exploration of the Fuji First Dungeon, expressing satisfaction at how quickly an understanding had been reached. He handed over an official identification card, emphasizing that it was essential for Takashi to have it in his possession. Meanwhile, the high-ranking woman confronted those around her, demanding to know the meaning of these sudden arrangements and questioning since when higher-ranking personnel relied on low-rank escorts. She declared sharply that she would be waiting alone at Fuji First, taking her leave with total confidence. After her departure, the remaining staff remarked on how close a call that was, offering Takashi additional items that might prove useful. The official reminded him not to think that someone of her stature would give up so easily, noting that S-rank individuals were an entirely different breed. He insisted that if Takashi did not join the investigation team, it would look like mere evasion, leaving Takashi with little choice but to agree. Relieved by his compliance, the official promised to handle the other guilds and S-rank responses, allowing Takashi to focus on his assignment. Female colleague smiled warmly at Takashi, welcoming him as a fellow coworker from this moment onward. Riding his motorcycle through the urban streets, Takashi reflected on how event-filled the day had been as he headed toward his next destination. Upon returning to the alternate world sanctuary, he was greeted warmly by his demon companion, who questioned why he hadn't come by the previous day. He explained that yesterday had been chaotic, describing how monsters appeared the instant a strange black crystal was touched, even though he hadn't touched it directly. Listening intently, she grew serious, pondering the malice and hatred that humans occasionally spoke of, wondering what kind of presence was truly at work. Kashi considered testing his new skill, transposition, to see if it would be effective on her, though his concealment skill had proven ineffective earlier. He apologized before attempting to test the new ability on her, leaving her startled and questioning his sudden actions. He looked over as Arya rushed toward him, exasperatedly demanding to know what had happened to him the previous day. Arya fought bravely on the 62nd floor of the sacred tree, striking down a level 62 dragon baby alongside Takashi. Checking her status, Arya lamented that her level remained stuck at 57, as defeating level 62 monsters barely granted her any experience. Takashi suggested they venture deeper, directly to the 81st floor. Ascending to the 81st floor of the sacred tree, Arya faced fierce gargoyles, her blade clashing against their stone hides with intense pressure. After the grueling battle, Arya celebrated reaching level 65, though she sighed in relief, commenting on how absurdly tough the fighting had been compared to hunting simple rabbits. Takashi warmly congratulated her. Takashi offered to help her with any quest she wanted the following day, prompting Arya to eagerly hold him to his promise. She mentioned a place known as Karen's Tomb, located a short distance from Lumel, where rumors claimed legendary treasure rested, though survival required being at least level 50. Takashi readily agreed to accompany her. Overjoyed by his confirmation, Arya raised her arms high and cheered with enthusiasm that she would do her absolute best tomorrow. After parting ways with Arya, Takashi reflected on Karen's tomb while his demon companion returned, asking if she should summon the next gargoyle. Takashi knew he now had to focus on raising his own level. He unleashed 30 shadow clones on the 81st floor to engage a colossal gargoyle, surrounding the stone beast in a coordinated assault. Gargoyle lashed out savagely, but Takashi's shadow clones moved as swift shadows, dodging and striking back with terrifying precision. The decisive blow. The massive gargoyle crumbled into pieces, shattered across the dungeon floor. Taking a moment to evaluate the battle, Takashi wondered if 30 shadow clones were too many, contemplating testing an assault with 20 instead next time. Clones efficiently defeated 15 gargoyles, yielding 50 A-rank magic stones and 50 gargoyle statues for their efforts. Checking his status after leveling up to 82, Takashi wondered if they could defeat the gatekeeper of this floor, asking his companion if she knew what kind of creature it was. He stood facing the formidable floor 81 boss, Astaroth, a horned demoness claiming mastery over shadow magic and dragons who challenged him to fight with all her might. Demonstrate no mercy, she unleashed a massive silver dragon to crush him right from the opening move. Refusing to hold back, he ordered his forces to charge straight into the clash. Vast horde of 50 gargoyles surged forth at her command, swarming the battlefield in an imposing display of aerial power. In response, he deployed 30 shadow clones to meet the overwhelming airborne threat head-on. Battlefield erupted into total war as a shadow clone sliced through the giant dragon and gargoyles with ruthless precision. He struck down the boss himself, well aware that summoned creatures would yield no experience points unless their summoner was defeated. Looking at the towering boss, he noted that 50 gargoyles had truly been an excessive number for her to conjure. System notifications confirmed the defeat of Astaroth and her gargoyles, granting him a massive windfall of over 8 billion experience points alongside rare A-rank magic stones and materials. Inspecting the looted dragon wings, he offered them to Helen, suggesting they could be crafted into powerful new weapons for her by tomorrow. She gazed back with a warm, appreciative smile, expressively thanking him for the thoughtful gift. Following morning, outside the inn, his companions bade him farewell as he prepared to set off on his journey toward Karen's tomb. Contemplating the travel distance, he weighed the options between taking a one-day carriage ride or spending substantial funds on teleportation magic. Suddenly, a familiar young traveler named Chris called out to him in greeting. Noticing Arya accompanying him, Chris inquired about their travel plans, prompting him to reveal that they intended to reach Karen's tomb by carriage. He listened as Chris offered a generous proposal. As an apology for their recent misunderstanding, he offered to teleport them directly to their destination. Without hesitation, the young swordsman eagerly accepted the offer, leaving Arya utterly startled by his swift agreement. While Arya pouted in private disappointment, having secretly looked forward to a quiet, romantic carriage journey for just the two of them, Chris led them into a quiet side alley and prepared to cast the teleportation spell. In an instant, the trio materialized directly in front of Karen's tomb, marveling at the towering, elaborate entryway guarded by stone sentinels.